Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Created the Ultimate Shadow Clones, Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Everyone was thrilled. Why shouldn't they be, anyway? At last, they would discover the clone just you. I apologize to all of you Japanese fans. Although I may use some Japanese, mostly honorifics, I'm sticking to English just you because my Japanese is so bad. Mizuki and Iruka had just gone over how to do the just you, and everyone, well, everyone but one orange-clad blonde, seemed to be picking it up pretty quickly. "Ha! Look at that loser. He can't even get it to stand up," exclaimed one especially cruel student who delighted in Naruto's constant failures at the basic just you. Mizuki pondered, maybe it's because of that fox in him. "Hey Iruka." "Yeah?" was the answer. "Think maybe Naruto has too much chakra? I mean, he always is the one with the most stamina." Iruka remarked, "You know, that would explain it." Laughing, Mizuki said, "So why not take it up a notch?" With the same smile, Iruka said, "Why not? Hey Naruto. Try this instead." Then, she demonstrated the shadow clone just you for Naruto. It would be an understatement to say that Naruto was thrilled that he could truly perform this just you. Then, being the excellent teacher that he is, Mizuki went one step further and told Naruto about Shadow Clone's capacity for learning. In order to demonstrate his point, Mizuki created his own Shadow Clone, took Naruto's clone out of earshot, and then proceeded to inform him of an incredibly clever prank idea. In this village, it was well known that he enjoyed the child's ability to make people laugh. The real Naruto instantly got a gleam in his eye and exclaimed, "Never thought of that, thanks," after punching the blonde's clone to dispel it and dispelling itself. While the others could only speculate as to what insanity would soon be let loose, Mizuki simply smiled. Naruto was then taken by Mizuki to see how many he could do, but he was stopped at 200. "Dang Naruto. You're a real monster when it comes to chakra, but it's not surprising, considering what he suppresses every day. Let's go back." Okay. After the other students in the class had finished, the two returned, and Iruka asked the one question that set off the years of pure badass behavior. "So how did it go?" "Naruto?" inquired Mizuki. "Yeah? Show them." Shadow clone Justu. Hundreds of Narutos appeared all around the students, instantly bringing their mouths to their lowest limit. Iruka remarked, "Well, heh, guess that answers that question." She didn't think the child could pull this off, given the size of his chakra reserves. Mizuki replied, "Yes, Naruto, send your clones to the library and begin studying everything you can find. You'll benefit from it in terms of your grades." He was absolutely correct. "Naruto, have your clones go to the library and start reading everything they can. It'll definitely help your grades," said Mizuki. Probably the only thing that really prepared Naruto for his future self was this one statement. He and the other pupils returned inside and began their history lesson while Naruto dispatched his clones to the library. However, Naruto abruptly got the deer in the headlights look and introduced his face to the desk he was seated at just 1 hour into the lesson. "Oi, Iruka-sensei." Naruto just kicked the bucket. Iruka and Mizuki simply sighed in response to the applause that followed this student's statements, while Mizuki added, "I thought I told him not to dispel them all at once. Oh well." Iruka immediately calmed the students down with his signature big head just you before explaining to them the disadvantages of the shadow clone just you. Unbeknownst to everyone else, however, Naruto's blackout was caused by more than just information overload. The mindscape of Naruto. Kyuubi's cage, SP. Naruto looked around and asked, "Where am I?" In front of a large gate that appeared to be secured with a piece of paper bearing the kanji for seal, he found himself in what looked like a sewer. A voice from the direction of the gate said, "Ah, so my landlord has finally come to check on his tenant in a tone that was simultaneously very funny and very depressing. Naruto asked, a little uneasy, "Who said that?" That kid's voice sounded like it was coming from a giant, so who can blame them? Gradually, a massive figure emerged from behind the gates. It was red, seemed to be as tall as the Hokage mountain, if not taller, and resembled a fox with 9 tails instead of 1, swishing in graceful full arcs. Naruto thought of one thing when he saw the tails. Oh crap. His real response, though, was far more audacious. "You? What are you doing here? And for that matter, where the heck is here anyway?" The enormous fox simply sighed and said, "Naruto, to answer your questions, this is your mindscape, or your inner mind. As for why I am here, your father sealed me in here when I attacked your village. This did not sit well with Naruto. Naruto's eyes went wide, and he nearly passed out from excitement. So you're the reason why I'm treated like dirt. Figure, wait, did you say my father? I thought the fourth? Focus, Naruto, and let me explain what happened, the fox fortunately said when he noticed this. At the fox's tone, Naruto became silent at once. Much better, now let me explain. Yes, your father was the fourth Hokage for this village. However, unlike what the village believes, I did not want to destroy the village back then. Then what were you doing here? I'm getting to that. You see, on that day, I was in my den with my mate and kit. This man, Orochimaru, decided to have the nerve to show up and ask for the way to become immortal. I immediately told him to leave since he was foolish to even think that I would share how I was immortal. He left, but not before slaying my mate, who was still relatively weak from giving birth last year, and my kit, who had yet to obtain the strength to become immortal. In a rage, I went to the Hidden Leaf village to get information on this man since he had worn the village's symbol. I was only going to ask for the man not go on a rampage when I ran into another man, one Madara Uchiha. This man was able to put me under a very strong genjutsu due to the fact that I was so angry. He then proceeded to order me to attack the village, which I had no choice to do. So you see, Naruto, I had no intention of attacking your village and I truly am sorry for the pain I have caused you. This explanation has been criticized as being weak, and it may be, but it does advance the plot. Kyuubi said this before lowering his head to the closest possible eye level with Naruto. Then, ruffling Naruto's hair, he took a small breath and went on. In order to make it up to you, I am willing to become your teacher. Those two from the academy are capable enough. However, they have a whole class to teach. There is also the fact that I can help you a lot with knowledge on just you and chakra control, which believe me, due to the vast amounts of chakra you have, is a must. I can also give you a summoning contract and access to some of my own chakra. However, if you are going to use it, we must train you so that you can handle it without going on a rampage in the process of tapping into it. It would be an understatement to say that Naruto was impressed. He said, so what do I have to do? First, wake up, your teachers are probably worried. When you do, tell them that your roommate talked to you and that you need to have a word with the Hokage. Why not just say I had a conversation with you? And spook the entire class? Good point, better get going. Returning to the classroom, around 30 minutes had passed in the outside world when Naruto's location abruptly emitted a faint moan. Iruka and Mizuki both expressed surprise that Naruto had woken up so early, and they went on to tell him so. I like that word, don't you? Naruto, you're awake? I would have thought you would have been out till morning at least. Yeah, well, I had a little chat with my roommate. Seems I need to talk with the Hokage after school lets out. Mizuki and Iruka exchanged a concerned look. Iruka, growing anxious, inquired, did you just say roommate? Yes. Naruto answered, trying his hardest to maintain a composed exterior while his thoughts were racing about what the fox had said. Hey sensei. What's the dobi talking about? That doesn't concern you. Naruto, when as soon as class is over, Iruka and I will take you to the Hokage. Yes, Mizuki sensei. The Hokage was doing paperwork, the bane of all Hokages, in his office. He was relieved to be interrupted when he heard a knock at the door. Old joke, I know. Come in. With solemn expressions, Naruto, Iruka, and Mizuki entered. What did he do this time, boy? The Hokage pondered. All right, what did Naruto here do this time? Iruka never once lost his serious expression as she said, it's not what he did, Hokage-sama, it's what he found out. This can't be good, Sarutobi thought. Found out? The elderly man asked, raising an eyebrow. Sigh, old man, I found about the Kyuubi and who my parents were. The big guy wants to have a word with you inside my mindscape, I think he called it. It would be an understatement to say that the Hokage was shocked. Naturally, he had intended to tell Naruto about the fox and his parents, but not for another 10 or so years. In order to find out what that damned fox wanted, he first considered having Naruto's seal examined to see if it was breaking. Very well then, Naruto. Iruka, Mizuki, as his teachers and the ones he told you about this, I want you to come as well. Trying not to show his nervousness, Mizuki said, very well, Hokage-sama. After all, about 8 years ago, they were set to confront the one creature that was determined to destroy the village. After approaching Naruto, the Hokage knelt down at eye level and touched Naruto's head. Mizuki and Iruka put theirs on top of their leaders. Nothing happened for a moment. The four's eyes then closed and flickered, indicating that they had entered Naruto's mindscape. The mindscape of Naruto. In various states of bewilderment, the three adults found themselves scanning the mindscape. They were aware that a person's perspective shaped their mindscape, but they also knew that it was typically associated with more upbeat locations like a palace or a grove of sakura trees. However, it appeared to be more of a hybrid of a bunker and a sewer than a place to find inner peace. When the three of them saw this location, their thoughts were similar. My god, what could have inspired Naruto to create this location? Iruka noticed a set of pipes that ran out the doorway and along the walls. I wonder why he set it up this way. Mizuki thought, it almost looks like a bunker to go in when an army is coming for you. Then, as she looked at the boy, she realized that this might be the reason why things were the way they were. Of the three Hokages, the third was the most taken aback. Normally, Naruto is incredibly joyful and vivacious. Does he actually feel like this most of the time? Given that he had no idea what a mindscape looked like or how it represented what was actually happening in his head, Naruto wasn't all that shocked. The cage with the enormous fox watching the group caught his attention more. Ah, so you finally came. The fox started to smile at all three of the adults as they slowly raised their heads after spinning around and examining its feet. It goes without saying that all three were becoming incredibly anxious, albeit unconsciously, for the Hokage. The fact that the fox had spoken to Naruto so quickly worried him, even though he had complete faith in Minato's sealing abilities. Given that they were facing the creature that made every effort to erase the Hidden Leaf Village from the map, the two teachers were considerably more anxious. Wondering exactly what this was about, Sarutobi replied, yes, we came. Naruto said that you wished to speak to me. That is correct. You see, I would like to teach the young kid here a few things. As he prepared to get them all out of there as quickly as possible in case things went south, the old man said, oh, and why might I ask would a 100-foot-tall demon fox want to train a small 8-year-old boy? The powerful demon lord murmured, because it is my fault for why those idiots you have sworn to protect are constantly abusing the child. If I had been in more control of my emotions, this never would have happened. Besides, I have grown quite fond of the kid. When Sarutobi spoke again, Iruka and Mizuki were observing this and attempting to understand what the fox meant by teaching and emotions. What do you mean by more control of emotions, and how do I know you won't use this as a means to escape? The fox laughed and then replied, trust me old man, if I wanted to, I could have escaped anytime I wanted to. Your predecessor was aware of what was going on that night, or at least on a small level. Therefore he made it so that I could interact with the kid a lot easier than most so-called tailed beasts with their containers. As for the emotions, well, why don't I give a demonstration first before I explain? The demon lord of the foxes, Kyuubi no Kitsune, immediately followed up on his statement with two actions that would shock the four humans for all time. He began to shrink at an incredible rate right away, going from a 100-foot-tall fox to one that was almost as tall as the Hokage's waist. Not only did the fox continue to shrink, but it also began to transform into a human. One that looked just as old and was just as tall as Sarutobi. Imagine Ichigo's sword in Bleach in its manifestation form, with neither eye wrapped. The group was taken aback by more than just this, though. As soon as he was done changing, red chakra erupted from his body and began to form a huge cloud that spread toward the rear of the cage. Following its departure, the man stepped directly through the bars, causing Naruto to be positioned behind the three men who moved in front of him. Don't worry, your Hokage definitely knew his seals. He made it so that either my chakra or my human form could go through the seal, but not both at the same time. The adults were unsure of their thoughts. The fox not only transformed into a human, but he also passed through the seal without any issues. Naruto was equally taken aback. Cool, how come you didn't do that the first time? He inquired. The fox dropped to his knees and approached Naruto's level. Chuckles, because there was no reason to, Kit. The Hokage was able to overcome his initial shock at the demon's ability to escape the cage in such a manner a moment later. You said you were going to explain about that night? With a nod, the demon explained how Orochimaru had visited his cave, asking to know how to become immortal, and then how he had murdered his family. How he eventually became trapped in Madara Uchiha's Genjutsu after following him to exact revenge. The Hokage finally consented to let the fox train Naruto after taking some time to process everything and come to completely trust the demon lord. The important element was that the old man could sense that the fox considered the child to be his own, at least in spirit if not blood. The four left the mindscape with a lot to ponder after working out all the details. There was a brief silence in the office before all four of the people suddenly opened their eyes and exhaled sharply, nearly simultaneously. Similar to their meeting just moments before, the Hokage spoke first. Well, Naruto, looks like you're going to have your hands full for the next few years. Yeah. Naruto continued to reflect on what had transpired inside their minds, the one place that most people do not want people in. Mizuki chose to bring the child's thoughts back to reality after speculating about what the young blonde was contemplating. If that doesn't get him, nothing will. Come on Naruto, let's get something to eat at Ichiraku's. Okay. Well, Mizuki thought, it's better than nothing. Hey Iruka, I still want to see how many clones Naruto can make. Considering that he is probably going to be learning a lot from now on, it would be a good idea to see how many he's capable of. He can have a shadow clone in class so that way he doesn't miss anything. Iruka remarked, sounds good to me. Just try not to overdo it with him. He assumed that Mizuki would have a busy day tomorrow if he knew anything about Naruto. Don't worry, I won't. After that, Naruto, Mizuki, and Iruka departed, effectively ending the meeting. The Forest of Death the next day. To make sure Naruto remembered the test of how many clones he could create, Mizuki had gone to his apartment early the following morning. After waking up from his initial drowsiness, Naruto sent a shadow clone to the academy to ensure he didn't miss anything from Iruka's class before departing. The student and teacher duo then proceeded to the one location where Mizuki was certain they wouldn't be disturbed: the Death Forest. Alright Naruto, let's see how many we can get. I know you can get at least 200, so let's start there and then start adding to the number. With a nod, Naruto made the appropriate hand gesture and exclaimed, Shadow clone Justu. Immediately, 200 clones surrounded the two of them. Mizuki gave a nod and went on. Alright Naruto, let's get started. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to be doing a sort of breathing exercise. I want you to breathe out as much as you can, then inhale as much as you can. Each time you do a cycle of this, I want you to create 50 clones until you feel like you can't keep making them. Think you can do that? After giving a nod, Naruto began the exercise, making clones between breaths. Soon, there were 2,000 clones instead of just 200. When it soon became clear that Naruto would be unaffected if he engaged in combat because he could clearly summon a virtual army whenever he needed to, Mizuki put an end to it. To help Naruto adjust to the effects, Mizuki then had him begin dispelling the clones in increasing numbers. One specific clone, located a few miles away, had one thing to say when the initial group of clones spread out. Academy. The classroom of Iruka, holy shit. With a throbbing vein on his forehead, Mizuki said, Naruto, I do not see how we learning about the history of this village requires that language. Would you mind telling us what does? The clone simply said, shaking his head. Boss just summoned somewhere around 2,000 clones. This stunned the entire class. After overcoming his initial shock, Iruka remarked, well, at least he won't have any trouble in fights. He'll just overwhelm them with sheer numbers. Returning to the Forest of Death after some time, Naruto and Mizuki were surrounded by only about 20 clones. Alright Naruto, it's time to get serious. Up until now, we were just seeing how many clones you could make and getting you used to the information they send. While it's true that them just standing around isn't much info to get back, it is information nonetheless and on a very big scale as well due to numbers. What we are going to do now is a more conservative method of using them. I'm going to explain the tree climbing exercise to you, and you'll have half of your clones work on that. After that, I'm going to go over some taijutsu with the rest, and they'll work on that. As for you yourself, we'll be working on your physical self with some exercises since clones don't transfer physical developments. After Naruto gave a nod, the student-teacher pair promptly went to work. With the exception of lunch and brief rest periods, Naruto and Mizuki spent the majority of the day running laps around the forest's perimeter fence. They continued until Naruto unexpectedly received memories from the clone that was sent to the academy, indicating that the clone had dispelled itself and that the academy was over for the day. At that point, Mizuki instructed Naruto to use the breathing exercise to dispel each of his remaining clones one at a time, just as he had done to bring them out. Naruto was happy that he followed Mizuki's advice because the clones had a lot of information to download because they had been working on it constantly. Naruto was reassured by Mizuki that he would eventually be able to take in more information much more quickly. In order to get in more physical training, Naruto would send a clone to the academy every day for the remainder of his academy years. He also had more clones working on just knowledge and chakra control all the time. Naruto, however, not only trained in the external world but also in his inner mind. When the academy wasn't in session, Naruto would spend every weekend learning from the Kyuubi virtually non-stop. Soon after, the fox gave Naruto the summoning contract and introduced him to the majority of the foxes. He even went so far as to be reverse summoned to the Fox's Mountain for an entire summer in order to get to know them all better and be able to work with them more easily. Naruto was among the strongest ninja ranked Chunin and lower a year later. In addition to having some of the best chakra control in the world, he was also the strongest person in his class physically because of all the training he was able to complete while a clone took his place in the classes. It didn't end there, either. Knowing his father's nickname, Naruto concentrated on speed in addition to strength. However, this wasn't beneficial to everyone. As you can see, Naruto still had a penchant for pulling practical jokes, and while his shadow clones made it nearly impossible for him to pull practical jokes, he would typically participate in them himself. People would constantly chase him after they learned what he would do, but he was usually able to outrun and outhide them all. Well, all but Iruka, but Naruto actually let Iruka catch him. Naturally aware of this, Mizuki once questioned Naruto about why he had really let his other teacher catch him. Naruto's only response was that it made Iruka appear to be the ultimate rule enforcer, which gave him more authority over the other students. At this, Mizuki could only laugh and shake his head. To the dismay of everyone else, Mizuki had a tendency to constantly hint at pranking ideas, and before long, he and Naruto were on equal footing with Naruto and Iruka. Not a single student in the class had any concerns about Naruto's performance on the final exams. Final exam day at the academy, every student was in the classroom going about their daily activities, which for them primarily involved chatting with their peers. The day's major conversation was about the tests and their performance. Some, like Neji, Lee, and Tenten, chose not to participate since they were preoccupied with identifying their sensei. Lee had a hypothesis and hoped to be correct. Naruto, who was considering his partner for the exam, was another individual who did not participate in any discussions. Since he had been able to get along with two people in the past few years on a somewhat good level, he had a pretty good idea. They were Hiza and Mato. Like Naruto, Mato and Hiza were two students who disliked it when people made assumptions about others before knowing all the facts. Additionally, both prioritized their education, which Naruto greatly valued because he believed that people who became ninjas only to impress others were not worth the time and effort required to train them. Fangirls and boys were the one thing Naruto detested the most. Two of the few individuals who could work well with Naruto were Mato and Hiza. They made an effort to get to know the blonde and occasionally joined him for training after academy sessions ended, which helped them become close friends. This was demonstrated when they took teamwork tests together, and the group received one of the highest scores in that department, second only to Neji, Lee, and Tenten. Before long, Iruka and Mizuki entered the room and began attempting to calm the class. Iruka decided to use his favorite Just You, his patented big head Just You, to get their attention after he had been waiting for about 15 seconds. Shut up and pay attention. Naturally, everyone followed instructions, and Mizuki and Naruto exchanged a look before laughing. Iruka continued by outlining the three sections that would make up the final exam. The first would be written, and the second would be physical, consisting of a taijutsu spar, a target test, and an obstacle course. The ninjutsu that the students had studied at the academy would be covered in the third section. When they learned that they would be taking a written test as their first task, the majority of the students moaned. Naruto, who by this point had read almost every book available to him, both in the civilian and shinobi libraries, was, of course, the only one who didn't voice any complaints. Therefore, it came as no surprise to anyone when Naruto put down his pencil less than 10 minutes later and then took a brief nap while he waited for the other students. Naruto also found the second section of the test to be simple. Naruto's ability to create shadow clones allowed him to devote a significant amount of time each day to physical training while a shadow clone was enrolled in the academy. This was evident when Naruto won the obstacle course with the highest score. This also applied to the target test. On that test, Naruto achieved a nearly flawless score of 94. No one was shocked when Tenten achieved a perfect score, the only person to surpass him on that test. The taijutsu test, which required the students to compete against one of the teachers for 5 minutes, was the only section of the exam that truly caused him any issues. Mizuki, who had been Naruto's teacher for the most part of the previous 2 years, chose to add some intrigue when he gave Naruto the honor of facing him. Mizuki took it a step further and attacked Naruto for a good 10 minutes, while the rest of the class fought the teachers, only using defensive tactics. The rest of the class had thought that fight was the fourth shinobi war. When Naruto had, at one point, about 50 clones fighting against him, Mizuki demonstrated to the class why he was a high Chunin level. Mizuki then destroyed the force and went straight after Naruto, forcing him to dodge in ways that the majority of the class believed were impossible. Nevertheless, Naruto did manage to get in a few of his own hits. Naruto was able to get in a good number of punches and kicks on Mizuki when he wasn't expecting him to do certain things because of his training with the fox and his unpredictable nature. The fact that Mizuki and Naruto were both smiling at each other during the entire fight, however, astounded everyone in the class save Iruka. In order to get the two to stop, Iruka eventually had enough and knocked them outside their heads. You were only supposed to go 5 minutes, and you Mizuki, were only supposed to fight defensively, not act like you were going to kill him. Mizuki attempted to defend himself as he and Naruto were massaging their heads, saying, "Ah, come on Iruka, if you had trained this kid like I had for 2 years, you wouldn't want to have a boring match with him either." Besides, Naruto didn't seem to mind. Naruto made the decision to share his thoughts as well. "Yeah, come on Iruka-sensei, it's not like we were going at each other with intent to kill." The entire class was taken aback because it appeared to them that those two were doing just that. Iruka was limited to staring at the two before he sighed, shook his head, and ordered the class to complete the test. To Mizuki's dismay, he ensured that if he knew someone else was skilled at taijutsu, they wouldn't fight. Following all of the spars, the teachers allowed the students to eat lunch for an hour before administering the last section of the test. Mado, Hiza, and Naruto met during that period to talk about their performance on the first 2 sections of the test and who they believed would be placed in teams. All 3 of them agreed that Lee, Tenten, and Neji would probably be placed on the same team and that their chances of being on the same team were very high. Before long, it was time to return for the last exam. Iruka returned inside and clarified that the 3rd test would involve attempting to escape from a genjutsu and demonstrating adequate proficiency in the 3 Academy Justice. To everyone's relief, Iruka clarified that while you had to try to break the genjutsu, failing to do so would not affect your final score because not everyone was built for it. Despite being among the worst at both creating and detecting them, Naruto believed he had a good chance of breaking one because the teachers would probably be using a low-level one and he would be able to tell when he was placed in one. The teachers took each student into a different room to test them one at a time. Naruto, who had gotten pretty good at reading body language, observed that while all of the students emerged wearing a forehead protector, some were more relieved than others. He assumed that they had encountered some difficulties with 1 or 2 of the justice, but the teachers commended them for their efforts and advised them to keep trying. That or they simply performed poorly on that written exam, he reasoned. However, you can't really hold them responsible for that. A few of those questions were a little challenging. When Mado and Hiza came out, Naruto was happy to see that they appeared to be trouble-free. When they emerged, they both gave him a nod before taking their seats. It was his turn shortly after that. From the other room, he heard, "Naruto Uzumaki, your turn." He calmly rose from his chair and entered the room, where he saw 2 teachers seated behind desks in a room with a potted plant in a corner. It was Iruka who initiated the conversation. "All right Naruto, like I said before, you need to break out of a genjutsu and prove that you can do the 3 Academy Justice reasonably well. And before you ask, I know you have problems with regular clones but are good at shadow clones. This is just a formality, so just create 1 shadow clone when you do that part. Now what do you want to do first?" After hearing Iruka's explanation, Naruto nodded and made the decision to finish the genjutsu test because it was his weakest skill. As Naruto had anticipated, he was able to emerge rather easily because he was aware that he would be placed in a genjutsu. He saw that his surroundings merged into his favorite ramen stand as soon as it began. But to Naruto's horror, the stand caught fire right away. After a full minute, Naruto realized it was merely an illusion and promptly stopped the torture by breaking the flow of his chakra. He glared at Iruka as soon as the illusion vanished, but Mizuki just looked perplexed. "Naruto, what did Iruka make you see? The way you were acting, I would think that you saw the utter banishment of ramen in the village." Naruto turned pale at once, but he soon recovered his temper and resumed his scowl at Iruka. He continued, "If you must know, Iruka-sensei decided to show me Ichiraku's burning to the ground. Now Iruka, I know that Naruto hasn't always the best thing for your health, but isn't that taking things a little too far?" Mizuki asked after glancing briefly at Naruto before turning to face his friend. The combined looks of the other 2 people in the room made Iruka laugh a little and start to perspire a little. He looked at Naruto as if he were a tiger ready to charge and remarked, "I thought it would be a good motivator to break the just you." Mizuki laughed and replied, "Well, congratulations. You definitely got him motivated. All right Naruto, let's get back to the test. You can worry about how to get back at Iruka later." When Mizuki mentioned getting even with Iruka, which the teacher did not like at all, Naruto's eyes glowed evilly. "I am completely screwed. I'd bet $100 that Mizuki intends to assist that kid, and I don't even want to consider what he might do to me." After giving Mizuki a nod, Naruto said, "Sure thing, Mizuki-sensei." He then transformed into the Hokage and replaced himself with the potted plant. After that, it was merely a formality when Naruto made the well-known cross sign and uttered the words, "Shadow Clone Justu," to command its appearance. After telling Naruto to get a headband and replacing his goggles with his own, Mizuki and Iruka congratulated him on a job well done. He nodded to his two friends as he left, and they returned the nod before he returned to his seat. Mizuki and Iruka returned as soon as he reached his seat, and Iruka began to speak about how they were now fully fledged ninjas and what missions to anticipate. Iruka never once looked directly at Naruto during this entire period, which he and Mizuki found amusing, leaving the other students in the class perplexed as to what precisely transpired inside. Iruka concluded by informing the students that they would have the remainder of the week off and should return to class on Monday at 7 a.m. to meet their teachers. Following that, everyone left the classroom until Naruto and the teachers were the only ones left. To show Naruto their appreciation for a job well done, Mizuki and Iruka made the decision to take him to Ichiraku's. Even though Naruto would never acknowledge it, he was happy to have an excuse to go check on his favorite restaurant and make sure it hadn't burned down. During their visit, Iruka discussed how Naruto would continue to have an advantage over his peers due to his shadow clones, particularly in the dreaded D-rank missions. "You know, Naruto, you're lucky that you have shadow clones. They will be a big help when you start doing those D-ranks." "Really? Why's that, Iruka-sensei? I thought you guys had said that they were just minor chores like painting a fence or walking dogs. Small things like that." Mizuki chose to respond on his friend's behalf after realizing his point. "That's true, Naruto, but think about it. With your ability to make so many clones, it will take practically no time to paint a fence if you have 50 or more clones working at the same time." Mizuki's point of view was immediately apparent to Naruto, who nodded in agreement. After engaging in small talk for the remainder of the evening, Iruka was forced to depart, stating that he needed to prepare all of the student reports for review by the Hokage and Junin team leaders. Now that Iruka was gone, Mizuki thought it would be the ideal opportunity to give Naruto one last prank idea. Especially a practical joke on a Chunin who had a scar across his nose. He leaned over and started whispering to Naruto, who couldn't help but grin when he heard. By the end, he was making an effort, and failing, to keep from laughing. He was laughing so hard that he eventually fell off his stool and onto the floor, clutching his stomach. The owner's daughter, Ayame, could only speculate as to what one of Naruto's instructors had advised him to do and hope that the victim wouldn't end up in too much trouble. Iruka eventually returned to his apartment about an hour later. Iruka was ready for a prank like a paint bomb swinging on a rope or a pressure-triggered eraser catapult, so she turned the key in the lock. Unfortunately, though, this was not to be. He instantly jumped back when he opened his door, expecting one of those two outcomes. He began to believe that Naruto might try something tomorrow when neither did, so he cautiously entered his home. But as soon as he was halfway through his living room, he began to feel extremely anxious. Thinking it would be best to be safe and stay at a hotel the night before, with Enbu to help him in the morning, he began to cautiously leave the room, constantly looking around before chaos broke out. Iruka was suddenly transformed into a living piece of tie-dye art as paintballs were thrown from all directions. Iruka went to the shower, undressed his painted clothes, and entered, believing that was the extent of the prank and that he was in dire need of a shower following the barrage. Unbeknownst to him, Naruto had gone to his bathroom and, with Mizuki's assistance, had used a special Just You that is typically used to phase through objects like walls to introduce a special dye into the pipes just before the shower head. Prior to being exposed to the air for a minimum of 1 minute after drying, this dye was essentially colorless. Iruka, mercifully unaware of the ongoing insanity, begins taking a shower to wash away the dirt and grime from the rest of the day as well as any paint that might have gotten on him from his clothes. Regretfully, this made it possible for the dye to cover him completely. He began to towel himself off as soon as he was out of the shower. He was looking into his mirror while brushing his teeth when he began to turn completely blue from head to toe, including his hair, much to his surprise and horror. Naruto. From the park bench they were sitting on, Mizuki and Naruto heard this and burst out laughing. Laughing, Mizuki remarked, "Sounds like he just got out of the shower." Naruto answered, "Yeah, just wait till he gets to his bedroom." Iruka went into his bedroom to try to get some sleep because he thought that he would be better equipped to get Naruto tomorrow. Unfortunately, he soon found out that his entire bedroom had been painted a bright pink color when he arrived. "Naruto. You are so dead, I am going to kill that kid." Mizuki smiled and said, "Sounds like he just did. Better stay low for the rest of the week, kid. Blonde said, yeah. But it was definitely worth it, and waved to the one person he knew would look out for him over the next week as he made his way home. The following day, Iruka was a laughing stock everywhere he went because he was completely blue. The only question everyone had was what the teacher had done to the top prankster in the hidden leaf for him to do that. When Mizuki saw it, he was laughing uncontrollably and concluded that Iruka had received his just desserts. Well, Iruka, look at it this way. Now you know never to mess with ramen around Naruto. Iruka only needed to give Mizuki a fierce look before he left. Naruto now takes pride in his intelligence. He therefore made the decision to keep quiet for the following week after pulling off his Smurf IFY prank on Iruka. He would wear a henge when he went grocery shopping in case he ran into his now blue sensei. It was fascinating to hear how the prank was received. Some were curious about his method. According to some of the rumors, he managed to make Iruka fall into a blue dye tank. Others were completely insane. But there was one thing that all of them agreed on. They would be wise to avoid doing the same to the blonde, regardless of what Iruka did to merit this prank. Naruto had asserted his supremacy over all school teachers a week prior. With the exception of Mizuki, every teacher in the academy stared at him as if he were a tiger about to attack them all. It goes without saying that every student thought this was hilarious and congratulated Naruto. A few pupils actually bowed to him when they felt like making a show of things. Most people would assume that Naruto would become upset about this. And it did, to a certain degree. But as he arrived at his classroom with a single thought, he simply accepted everything. Well worth the effort. When he arrived at his classroom, he was treated similarly and received a few high fives from the students as he made his way to his seat. Some of the students, however, weren't particularly fond of the blonde's behavior and the attention that followed. One Neji Hyuga was in charge of this group. Standing over Naruto's desk, the Hyuga spat, "Only a failure such as yourself would go to such lengths for attention." The blonde was having a good day at the moment, so he didn't let the Hyuga affect him. Naturally, that didn't stop the child from responding. "Failure, huh? Correct me if I'm wrong, Neji, but doesn't the two facts that I am here today and that I now have a headband mean that I am not a failure? And just be glad I don't decided to do something similar to you and possibly your whole clan for that little comment of yours." All of a sudden, the class is silent. Now, a lot of the students were unsure if Naruto would follow through on his promise. "You wouldn't dare," Neji exclaimed, rising with a murderous intent. "Oh yeah. Watch me. Trust me, I could get into your compound and out before anyone knew what happened. And even if I do get caught, you know I can outrun anyone in this village, be it sheer speed or stamina. Or have you forgotten that only Iruka-sensei can catch me, and even he knows that I let him?" When Iruka entered and asked everyone to sit down, the Hyuga were spared from having to respond to that. The entire class began to wonder what would happen to their favorite prankster when he turned to face Naruto. Iruka looked the blonde directly in the eye and said, "A little over the top, don't you think, Naruto? I could say the same to you, Iruka-sensei. Now you know never to use such a genjutsu ever again." The blonde who spoke returned. Iruka simply let out a sigh and made the decision to start the show. As Iruka gave the speech he usually gave to the graduating classes about being full-fledged shinobis and all that, Naruto let his thoughts wander. After his teacher went through teams 1 through 6, he listened half asleep until his name was called and he became alert. Team 7 will consist of Naruto Uzumaki, Mato Herzen, made up on the fly just now and most likely never to be used again in this story. And he's Atano. Again made up just now. Your Junin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. As they had anticipated, all three members were happy to be on the same team. Naruto was a little let down by their sensei's choice, though. The man did indeed know his father. Was actually once a pupil of his father. Was he required to be late for everything, though? Additionally, they weren't shocked when the following was used to call up the members of Team 9. Team 9 will consist of Neji Hyuga, Ten, and Rock Lee. Your Junin sensei will be Mate Guy. In a tone reminiscent of someone who is going to execute someone, Naruto uttered, "May God have mercy on your soul, Hyuga." While those who knew Guy could only silently concur with him, others who did not were able to laugh at this. They were aware that the Hyuga's sanity would be put to the ultimate test. Ten's would probably be just as well. The Hyuga simply asked, glancing at Naruto, "Why would I need mercy, Uzumaki?" "You'll find out eventually, Neji. I'll visit you in the asylum every week. I promise," Naruto says with a shudder. The Hyuga prodigy was obviously unnerved by this, and not in a good way. But despite his best efforts, he was unable to persuade the blonde to elaborate. With a quick glance at Naruto and a few giggles, Iruka concluded the team placements by saying, "You guys have an hour for break before your Junin senseis arrive. Once again, it's been an honor having you as my students. Even if some of you did your best to give me premature gray hairs." The students began to follow him as he left the classroom, saying, "Good luck, and if you ever need an advice, or just plain need someone to talk to, feel free to come find me." Before returning to class, Naruto, Mato, and Hiza made the decision to stop by Ichiraku's for a quick snack. Naruto chose to work on some of his seals while he waited. As they waited for the other students in their class to return, he continued to do this. Once everyone had left with their senseis, it was just the three of them. After 15 minutes or so, he produced a specific seal that both of his teammates recognized. They were likely the only ones who knew about it outside of the Hokage and possibly their former teachers. Naruto soon had a violin in his hands after a controlled chakra burst and a puff of smoke. Yes, I am aware of that. However, I am making Naruto incredibly musically gifted in this one because he can learn almost anything in a day. Believe me, he has other instruments. He began to tune his instrument before playing a gentle yet upbeat melody. Remember the violin section from the Gorillaz' left-hand Suzuki method? Mato and Hiza simply relaxed while listening to Naruto play one of his favorite instruments. Kakashi arrived approximately an hour later to this scene. Kakashi listened to the music while standing outside the classroom door, which was still closed. To his surprise, the person playing the instrument appeared to be very skilled. When it turned out to be Naruto playing, he was even more shocked, but he eventually reasoned that it shouldn't have surprised him given what he had heard about Naruto's use of his ability to build armies of shadow clones. He still recalls the few days he spent at the shinobi libraries checking out a few items and discovering clones everywhere, just reading. I wonder if that will allow him to use genjutsu. The Cyclops was perplexed. He then shakes himself back to the scene in front of him and says, "Glad to see at least one of you has an interesting hobby. Meet me up on the roof." He then shines, SP, to the roof. In case you were wondering, he is not another Tayuya. Note that he still sucks at genjutsu. To Kakashi's astonished delight, Naruto promptly seals his violin, and the three now official ninja exit the window and ascend the wall to the roof, taking seats in front of him. Well, I won't have to teach them that one thing. Given how much Sensei's son learned from those clones, I can see how he might have learned how to do that. At some point, he must have taught the other two. What else did he teach them, I wonder? Good to see you guys know a few tricks outside of what's taught in the academy. It shows that you actually wish to put effort into your shinobi careers. Oh well, I'll find out soon enough, I'm sure. Mato remarked, that and it helps Naruto to do pranks that much easier. The three young people burst out laughing, and Kakashi quickly joins in. He answered, fair enough. And went on. Now then, why don't we go ahead and get to know each other? Say your name, what you like, what you dislike, hobbies, and dreams. Hiza was the first to speak. What, did you think she was like Sakura? Sorry, people, this kunoichi is more than just book smart. Sensei, why don't you go first? After all, we pretty much know each other, but we don't know much about you. If you guessed that was the manga version, you get a cookie. Oh. Me? My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I'm the type of person who doesn't feel like talking about his likes and dislikes. My dreams for the future are none of your business. Anyway, I have lots of hobbies. Together, the three of them thought, all we really got was his name, which we knew anyway. Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, gee, sensei, you really stick to the shinobi rules on information, don't you? Kakashi also raised an eyebrow and said, oh, and what would they be, Naruto? 1. Don't give out more than absolutely necessary. 2. Use any information to your advantage and use said info to disillusion your opponent. Even true information can be used to fool others. Well yes, I guess you could say that. Now then, since you seem to like to talk so much, why don't you start off, Blondie? At the nickname, the same eyebrow shot up once more, but Naruto dropped it and got started. Alright, as all of you know, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. As for my likes, I like to train, sometimes with my friends, pull pranks, and just generally have fun with my friends. Oh, and the occasional meal of ramen. The other two genin snored at this. My dislikes include those who like to judge without getting their facts straight, and bullies. As for hobbies, I like to learn how to play new instruments and am a semi-amateur gardener. Kakashi's eyebrow once again found itself raised at the word semi-amateur. I also like to read up on any new justice or just about anything else I find at the library or bookstores. For dreams, well, looks at the Hokage monument, specifically at the 4th. I want to make my parents proud of me and become Hokage someday. As he listened, Kakashi thought, his father's son, definitely, all right, he said, gesturing to Mado, you next. Okay. My name is Mado Herzan, and my likes are hanging out with my friends, training with Naruto and Hiza, and occasionally giving Naruto a hand with his pranks. Oh boy, Kakashi thought. I generally don't have many dislikes besides hating those who judge others and bullies. As for hobbies, I like to learn about seals. Granted, I'm nowhere Naruto's level, but I think I'm pretty good considering. As for dreams, well, let's just say that I want to be the best I can be. Kakashi gestures to Hiza while nodding to himself. You next. Hiza starts and nods. All right. My name is Hiza Tano. I like training with my friends and just enjoying life in general. I dislike bullies and those who judge and think they are better than everyone just because of who their parents are. Even worse are girls who simply became ninja to impress someone. Both Mado and Naruto nod at this, which Kakashi caught and approved of. As for hobbies, I like to read and sometimes help Naruto with his little adventures. Another eyebrow raised. Seriously, Kakashi should just leave it up there. As for dreams, I want to be the best I can be in this world. Well, I have Sensei's son and his 2 friends, and all 3 of them seem to have their heads on straight and are truly willing to give it their all. Kakashi muses, nodding to himself once more. I am relieved that Hiza is not a fangirl. Well, from what I've heard, all 3 of you have your minds set in the right direction. Meet up at Training Ground 7 at 7 tomorrow morning for your Genin exam. That would be a pain to deal with. 3, 2, 1. Sensei, I understand that this is the true exam, but do we need to do anything special for it? Hiza responded. The fact that these 3 were aware of the exam's objective pleased Kakashi, who instructed them to simply arrive fully prepared and to skip breakfast unless they wanted to lose it. After that, he shined. To talk about potential battle formations for the test, Naruto and the others made the decision to go to the Akamichi barbecue restaurant. After an hour, they decided that although the strategies they had developed were good, they would not know which, if any, they would need to employ until tomorrow. After that, they parted ways to prepare separately. Naruto went in search of his new sensei after deciding it would be beneficial to speak with him. He also knew where to go pretty well. Monumental Stone at the Memorial Stone. Kakashi was reflecting on his new team. Particularly about one blonde with sapphire eyes and whiskers. I promise not to disappoint you, sensei. I'll see to it that Naruto's dream comes true. His thoughts were abruptly cut off when he heard a voice behind him. I knew I would find you here, sensei. When Kakashi turns around, he sees the blonde standing behind him grinning slightly. Naruto. What a pleasant surprise. Was there something you want to talk about? Kakashi said, grinning his trademark eyes. Naruto approached the monument and briefly bowed his head in observance of the names inscribed on it. Then he said, turning to Kakashi. Well, yeah. You see, we never really got the chance to talk before, and I was wondering if you didn't mind telling me anything about my parents. With another quick smile, Kakashi said, of course, Naruto. How about we visit my apartment? They take off after Naruto nods. The apartment of Kakashi. When Kakashi's apartment was reached by Naruto and Kakashi, they began discussing Naruto's parents. They spent a considerable amount of time talking about their personalities, how Naruto's father always gave his all to help others and do his best, and how his mother could be just as much of a prankster as he was. They also discussed Kakashi's father and his missions, such as the time they had to demolish a bridge behind enemy lines. At 9 o'clock at night, Kakashi made the decision that Naruto should begin making his way home. Well, Naruto, it's getting late, so I think you should head to your apartment and get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a big day. Alright. Thanks for that, Kakashi. It was fun. Good night. Anytime, Naruto. Good night. Naruto then returned to his apartment, feeling relieved that he had spent the day searching for his teacher. Training Ground 7 the following day, Mado and Hiza were heard playing a Native American-style flute as they were making their way to Training Ground 7. As they arrived, they noticed Naruto seated in front of the center of 3 posts that were positioned in the field. Imagine a recorder that is longer, made of wood, and lacks a bell at the end. They instantly thought of a plateau over a desert with eagles flying overhead and other wildlife all around them as he sat playing an Indian-style melody. Since he was unable to cast a good genjutsu to save his life, they were still baffled by how he was able to conjure up images of such things. They approached him and simply listened to him play. In reality, Naruto was playing one of his instruments to prevent the two from continuously checking the time, even though they were unaware of it. Because he knew where Kakashi was at all times and why he was always late, he took this action. Additionally, he intended to try his hardest to resolve that issue in the future. He merely played to keep the other two occupied for the time being, though. An hour or so later, in a puff of smoke, Kakashi appeared. As soon as he saw Naruto playing, he began to listen as well. Or at least he tried to, because Naruto looked up and stopped playing mid-note the moment he saw him. Hisa asked Mado why he had stopped playing as soon as they both awoke from their semi-trances. Naruto simply gestured to Kakashi over her shoulder. When Hisa and Mado turned around and saw their sensei standing behind them, Mado chose to give him a rather peculiar greeting. "Did you have to show up just now? Naruto was playing a real good song just now." After laughing and quickly apologizing for cutting off his song so suddenly, Naruto replaced his flute's ceiling scroll. "So what's the test going to be, Kakashi-sensei?" he asked after glancing at Kakashi. "Well, Naruto, like I said yesterday, this test is to see if you actually have what it takes to be a ninja. I have 2 bells here and all you 3 each have to do is get one before noon," Hisa said, attempting to ascertain Kakashi's point of view. "But sensei, there are only 2 bells." The boys were following suit. "That's right. Whoever doesn't get a bell gets sent back to the academy. Also, whoever doesn't get a bell will be tied to one of those 3 posts behind you and watch as I eat my lunch." The 3 genin hopefuls glanced at one another and realized something was amiss, but they decided to speak once the test began and simply nodded to Kakashi to indicate that they understood. "Looks like they already suspect something," Kakashi thought, observing the look they exchanged. "All right, if you 3 are ready then we will get started." "Good, they'll need that ability to look underneath the surface as they grow up." Kakashi placed a timer on top of the middle stump and set it to ring at noon after the 3 hopefuls nodded. He then exclaimed, "Ready, begin," and quickly disappeared from the 3's line of sight. The 3 of them gathered and started conversing as soon as he left. Right away, Hisa questioned, "There is no way that getting the bells is the true test. Whoever heard of a genin team with only 2 genin?" In the hopes that he might know something about what was happening, Mado said, "Agreed, there has got to be another side to this thing." Naruto, however, chose to voice his opinions before he could say anything else. "I think it's the old divide and conquer test. See if we are able to get over a problem where we could be working at odds with each other. I bet $50 that this is a test to see if we work together instead of going on our own." The 3 of them laughed, and Hisa added, "Although you're most likely right about the divide and conquer theory." Hisa snorted and said, "No thanks, Naruto, you're just too lucky for me to take that bet." Mado turned to Naruto and said, "So now we know what the real test is. How do we get those bells? Any ideas, Naruto?" he asked. After pondering for a minute, Naruto's eyes began to shine evilly. A moment later, he received a smile that was even more sinister and caused the 2 to slightly recoil. Mado remarked, "Oh man, I've seen that look before." "Yeah. So have I. Whatever he's thinking about, Kakashi-sensei is in serious trouble." Still grinning, Naruto remarked, "Well, not Kakashi-sensei himself, more like that book of his." "Are you crazy?" replied Mado. "From what I've heard, that thing is sacred to him." Naruto explained his plan to the 2, saying, "Exactly, he will do anything for it. So we use that to our advantage." The 2 were about to object when Naruto went on, "Mado, Hisa, don't get any wrong ideas, but I don't need you to do anything major except set up some traps and then stand in the field. This plan requires a lot of speed to succeed, and let's face it, I'm the fastest in our class." Despite their disapproval of Naruto doing all the work alone, the other 2 agreed because he made a compelling argument. Inquiring as to how Naruto would obtain not only the bells from Kakashi but also his most prized possession, Mado said, "Okay, Hisa and I will stay here, but what are you going to be doing?" "Glad you asked that. Here's what we do. You 2 are going to take all the paper bombs we have and set up a minefield corridor." A minefield corridor is exactly what it sounds like. A corridor with mines on either side. In the woods to my left. Make it real thick because Kakashi and I are going to be going real fast. When I get Kakashi to chase after me, I'll set them off to distract him. Once he's dazed, I'll send him into the field where you guys are. And once he's there, he will give you 2 the bells. That is if he wants his precious book back unharmed." "But how are you going to get his book and for him to chase you down the corridor?" Hisa was perplexed. Naruto remarked, "Leave that to me." The 3 then set up, saying, "Let's get everything set up." Training Ground 7. An hour into the bell test. After a speedy completion of the preparations, Mato and Hiza returned to the field to await Naruto's next move, which was to have Kakashi pursue him through the corridor. They hoped Naruto knew what he was getting himself into because they were still wondering how he intended to obtain that vile orange book in order to get Kakashi to give up the bells. For the next half hour, Naruto had been occupied with finding Kakashi. Although it is true that he could find Kakashi by sending out a few chakra pulses, that would have both informed Kakashi that Naruto was capable of doing so and given Kakashi a sense of his location. After all, without mastering skills like chakra spikes, you can't become Chunin or Junin. Thus, Naruto was using more traditional methods to find Kakashi. Naruto's senses were far more sensitive than most people's because of all the training he had done with the Kitsune in their summoning realm. He was currently tracking down his soon-to-be vice teacher with his Inuzuka-like nose. I'm glad I stayed at his apartment for so long last night. Naruto was tracking Kakashi well, but the one-eyed Junin appeared to be aware of his pursuit and continued to move around. I've got his scent down good now. At last, Naruto managed to sufficiently conceal his chakra and positioned himself. Fortunately, or sadly, in Kakashi's case, the corridor they set up was only a few football fields away. Upon realizing that Kakashi was likely aware of the corridor, Naruto prepared to run like a bat out of hell, assuming that the Cyclops was playing a practical joke on them. Kakashi, meanwhile, was anxiously looking around him without looking. He could smell Naruto following him for the last 45 minutes. The boy was good, but his scent was not completely gone. Although Kakashi was impressed, he was a little concerned that Naruto was the only one there. Only Naruto appeared to be actively looking for him, even though the three hopefuls appeared to understand the test's true purpose better than any of the other teams he had tested previously. For him, this meant two things. The other two either had a plan that Naruto would entice him to join, or they were expecting Naruto to do all the work. He believed the second because he had witnessed them set up the mine corridor, but he was concerned about both. He was concerned about the first thought because it implied that they were not as eager to protect one another as he had assumed. He was even more worried about the second. Just in front of his position, there was a good deal of explosive. When he decided he might as well finish this, he reluctantly made his way to his position, hoping Naruto wouldn't suffer any serious injuries. Naturally, this was going to change soon, but he was unaware of it. Once he was back with Naruto, he had quickly confirmed that he was certain that the bulge in Kakashi's pouch was his target and that it was on the same side as the bells. I'm making the bells on Kakashi's left side not right like canon. You'll see why in a moment. Naruto took a deep, silent breath and used the final moment to mentally go over his plan. Once he had reviewed everything in his mind, he blinked directly at the lower left rear of the Cyclops. He was back with Kakashi when he felt something approaching him very quickly. He sprang to his right and jumped out of the way just in time to see Naruto kneel on a branch in front of him, his head bowed and his arms in front of him. I hardly noticed him move. Kakashi's visible eye was wide open as he thought. He nearly received a bell. It makes sense why he and the other two created that hallway. He could easily lose me by going right through and setting it off halfway through. It was almost successful as well. Not bad, Naruto, but I'm afraid you messed up your chance to get the bell that you were after. Naruto merely grinned and continued to turn away from the silver-haired Junin. Actually, I got just what I was after. Kakashi raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh," when Naruto got up, turned around, and revealed what was in his right hand, one orange book. His face changed to one of shock. When Kakashi noticed a gleam appear in the blonde's eye, that shocked expression swiftly changed to one of horror. In a terrified tone, he questioned, "What are you going to do?" Naruto simply grinned and used a fireball just to quickly burn the offending book. For 2 seconds, Kakashi just stared in horror, and then his desire to kill increased to the point where Kyuubi became uneasy. Kakashi screamed, "Naruto, I'm going to kill you," and proceeded to pursue Naruto, who quickly turned around and fled after sensing the threat. Unaware that they were going directly toward the gauntlet, Kakashi pursued Naruto mindlessly. When Kakashi arrived at a section where the bombs were calibrated to stun rather than kill, Naruto proceeded straight ahead and detonated each and every bomb in the hallway. While in the field, Mato and Hiza were startled by a massive explosion that shook the ground beneath them, causing them to fall onto their backs. Naruto appeared to the right of the branch Kakashi was on a few seconds later, while Kakashi was still dazed. He was already a few feet above the branch and slightly behind it, so when he landed, it would be on the branch below. He kicked as soon as he appeared, his right foot striking Kakashi's head and sending him flying into the field where Mato and Hiza were standing again. Naruto appeared on a tree branch on the edge of the field as Kakashi was getting to his feet, wondering where the train that had struck him had come from. I suggest you give the bells to my teammates, Kakashi-sensei. And why would I do that? After all, there is no need to pass a two-man squad, Kakashi said, turning around and giving Naruto a fierce look. Two-man squad? Hisa inquired, feeling extremely uneasy due to their sensei's gaze on her friend. Mato simply swallowed and watched. Naruto simply cocked an eyebrow at Kakashi, who responded with venom in his voice. Naruto is going to be in the hospital for a very long time for what he did. Maybe even in the morgue. The other two quickly retreated. Talk about displaying courage in the face of danger. Asking, why? Because I burnt a shadow clone of this? He held up an orange book. When Kakashi learned that it was a fake Naruto that had been burned, his mouth fell to the ground, and he felt like slapping his forehead. When Naruto opened his closed right fist, a ball of flame appeared inside, but he was immediately terrified once more. Remember, Naruto has been using shadow clones for a long time, so he has basic control over all the elements. He is most proficient at wind, but fire is almost as good because wind powers it. At that moment, Naruto gave Kakashi a chance. Give Mato and Hisa the bells or I burn it for real. The bells on his belt were swiftly unhooked and thrown to the other two hopefuls by Kakashi, who then spoke in a voice that caused the others to perspire. There. They have the bells. Now please give me back my precious. After raising his right eyebrow once more, Naruto threw the book to the Cyclops, who treated it like a child right away. There. I won't let anything bad happen to you, I promise. Naruto simply shook his head, fell to the ground, and then approached the others, leaving Mato and Hisa in disbelief. Of the two, Mato was the first to regain consciousness and inquire. So I guess we passed, right? Yes, you all pass, but, Kakashi said, turning to face Naruto. Even with your accelerated healing ability, I will send you to the hospital for a year if you even consider doing that again. Naruto simply nodded, and Kakashi went on. That being said, you guys came up with a good plan. Naruto got me in such a furious state I completely forgot about the corridor when I chased him. He then got me into the middle where the lesser bombs were and activated all of them. The concussive force was enough to daze me so that I would be open to be forced into the field where you two were. You then forced me to give the bells to your teammates. This showed you were willing to work together and that Naruto is willing to give up his own needs for others, and I'm sure you two were the same. The rest of the group nodded. Good job. Meet back here tomorrow at 7 for training and then we'll do missions in the afternoon. You have the rest of the day off, you two. Naruto, I would like to talk to you. As they left and faced his new sensei, Naruto nodded and gave his now official teammates high fives. He definitely has more than just his father's looks, Kakashi thought as he stared at Naruto for a moment. Naruto, I want to talk to you about the training that we are going to be doing starting tomorrow. He waited for him to nod before continuing. He also has amazing speed. I take it that you had taught the other two the tree climbing exercise. A further nod. Well, I would like you to begin teaching the other two any other chakra control exercises that you may know of starting tomorrow. That and working on their taijutsu and any ninjutsu you can would be a big help since they're likely to do as you say without any problems. Naruto gave a wink and replied, Sure, I can do that. It would give them a chance to actually learn after all. Just be here by noon so we can get some missions in. Kakashi simply nodded and grinned. After that, the two parted ways. When Mizuki predicted that Naruto's shadow clones would be useful, he wasn't lying. Team 7 completed twice as many D-rank missions in a week as was necessary to participate in the upcoming Chunin exams. Naruto would eventually accept at least 10 missions at once. Since all of the fences were painted quickly and the monument required no cleanup time, it was said that the village never looked so nice. The only significant issues arose during Tora hunting, which is every genin's worst nightmare. This wasn't an issue for very long until Naruto had the brilliant idea to bring catnip once. Everybody who had ever had to complete this mission found themselves wondering why they hadn't considered it and palming their foreheads. Everyone was relieved when Naruto eventually appeared to be able to win the cat from hell's favor to the extent that the nip was no longer required. However, the three were tasked with more than just cats and fences. Many store owners who received large shipments quickly discovered that they only needed to pay for one team, even though at the time they could have had nearly 5. Naruto benefited from this since he was gradually improving everyone's attitude toward him while working at all of these stores. Some of the owners would even give him discounts these days. In addition to performing D ranks, Team 7 put in a ton of training. Naruto was improving with Kakashi, even though he was still frequently late for everything. But when he did show up for the team meetings, he was an absolute taskmaster. Along with other intense exercises like running up and down the Hokage's monument, the three would complete laps around the village every day. Additionally, these were only their warm-ups. They would then engage in rapid spars. More like all-out warfare. They would then focus on learning justice and controlling their chakras. During these periods, Naruto discovered that he could use wind chakra to cover his hands or any other part of his body and cut through almost anything. Imagine using wind rather than ordinary chakra in Kabuto's signature fighting technique. Naruto also increased the intensity of his weight training. Naruto made the decision to start wearing weights to increase his speed like his father's a year after he started using shadow clones. Naruto stepped it up after joining Team 7. He began wearing chakra weights in place of ordinary weights. You would feel 10 pounds heavier for every percentage of your total chakra that was placed into a seal thanks to these weights. Naruto had reached 30% by the end of the month. Naturally, this rendered him nearly invincible when sparring with his teammates whenever he removed them. 2 months into their training, Naruto and Kakashi were dragged into a 2-on-2 fight with Guy after he witnessed one of these spars. It wouldn't have been so horrible this one time. But in reality, Naruto erred by using Lee to wipe the floor in fewer than 5 moves. I'll leave that up to your imagination, but know that Naruto used his chakra hands to prevent Lee from moving. Regretfully, Kakashi defeated Guy as well, albeit more slowly. But Guy's insistence on more games after the damage was done resulted in the eternal rivalry of youth between the ages. I know, scary, right? Since Lee was one of the few individuals his age who could truly give him a good workout during sparring, Naruto actually did not mind. If only he could get those two away from that youth-related nonsense. Naturally, he also received training from Kyuubi, his adoptive father. The fox decided it would be a good idea to have Naruto practice sword fighting in order to speed up his training after he graduated. But Naruto's days weren't limited to training and missions. On his days off, he would occasionally wait for Iruka and Mizuki to conclude their lectures at the academy and engage in conversation with them. On one of these days, he had the opportunity to meet Neji's cousin, who would quickly become one of his most valued acquaintances. 4 months following graduation at Hidden Leaf Village Ninja Academy, Teacher's Lounge. Naruto was making his way to the Teacher's Lounge through the corridors. He and his team had just finished AC rank, and he was going to share it with his 2 favorite teachers. This is his third, but the first outside of the Land of Fire. He turned to see the 2 friends in the room, who were just finishing up their paper grading. Naruto entered and sat down at the table where his 2 senseis were seated, saying, "Hey guys." Mizuki looked up from his most recent paper and said, "Hey Naruto, how you been doing lately?" "Been good. Just got back from AC rank outside of the Land of Fire," said Naruto. Iruka inquired, eager to find out how his favorite student from the previous year's class fared. "Really? That's your first mission outside of the country, isn't it? How did it go?" "Yeah, it was. Anyway, I did fine, Iruka-sensei. It was a simple escort mission of a merchant's caravan to a town just west of the border. Since it was a large caravan, we had to work with another team. Would have had to have another team with us as well, but apparently someone in the caravan had heard about my shadow clone ability and asked that I quote-unquote put them to good use." After Mizuki and Iruka simply laughed at that, the 3 of them conversed for a short while before the 2 teachers departed for their apartments. Naruto saw a girl on the swing in front of the academy as he was also heading out. Normally, he wouldn't give it any thought. But he immediately recognized the loneliness in the girl's eyes. Thinking back to the days before he met Mizuki and Iruka, he thought, "She looks just like I did all those years ago." He decided to speak with her and went to the girl, whose eyes told him she was a Hyuga. Why would a Hyuga be lonely, I wonder? He questioned himself. When he was beside the girl, he said, "Hey, mind if I sit down here?" The girl was shocked to hear someone speaking to her because she had been so preoccupied with simply looking down and daydreaming. She jumped a little when she turned to see a blonde with the bluest eyes she had ever seen and facial features resembling whiskers. She simply shook her head slowly and turned back around, placing an arm over the swing's rope support as she was pulled out of her reverie. Remember Naruto watching the others after failing the exam the last time. After observing her for a short while, Naruto sat down cross-legged. Naruto made the decision to try to persuade the Hyuga to talk after they had been silent for roughly 5 minutes. After inhaling deeply, he addressed her, saying, "My name's Naruto Uzumaki. What's yours?" After giving him a brief glance, the girl said, "Hinata Hyuga," and then turned around once more. Realizing that he was not making any progress this way, Naruto simply sighed and made the decision to adopt a more straightforward strategy. He looked at her and said, "So who are you waiting for?" This time, she didn't even turn as she said, "No one really." In an attempt to get the girl to speak to him more than 3 words, Naruto remarked, "I find that odd. Normally parents come to pick up their children." "Well, usually father sends someone for me, but lately no one has come," she replied. She finally gave me a complete sentence, Naruto thought, then scowled. He put it this way. "Why's that?" The Hyuga was just saying, "He probably doesn't think I'm worth it. No matter what I do, it just doesn't seem to be good enough. He seems to think my younger sister can do everything better than I can." In an attempt to lift her spirits, Naruto remarked, "I'm sure he doesn't think that. But he does. Ever since my mother died giving birth to my sister, he's been nothing but cold and heartless to me and my sister. But more so to me," she groaned. However, she went on before Naruto could respond. "It's not just him either, the whole council thinks I'm good for nothing and weak. And why shouldn't they? I can't seem to do anything right and it's never good enough for my father." This just infuriated Naruto. He had been labeled a failure and told he was incapable of doing anything correctly for years. He stood in front of the girl and put a finger beneath her chin, which caused her to tilt her head upward and meet his gaze. "Listen, Hinata, and listen well. You cannot let what those people tell you get to you." "But," began the girl. "No buts. The only one who can call yourself a failure is yourself, and from what I can see you are not one. Just someone who is lacking confidence. Believe me, I know what it is like to be called a failure. Hell, I've been called even worse. But I didn't let those idiots get to me, and I grew stronger because of it. Yeah, it took a lot of work, but I kept at it. All you have to do is just keep going." He stared at her for a while without even once. Hinata simply gave him a nod, but she was secretly ecstatic about what she was hearing. This individual didn't believe she was a failure. Someone who had experienced and overcome the same thing she was going through at the moment. The next thing he said made her even more excited. "If these fools think you're weak, then all you have to do is show them they're wrong. All you have to do is get stronger. I know you can, and if you want, I can help." Hinata was shocked by what she heard. This individual was willing to assist her because they had experienced the same things she had. "You really mean it? You'll really help me?" she asked, meeting his eyes. Hinata nodded, and Naruto simply nodded, adding, "Yes. If you want me to. Me and my team just finished AC rank today, so I don't think we will be doing any missions again tomorrow. Let me ask my sensei, and if we aren't, then we'll get started then. I'll be waiting here if I don't have any." Hinata merely gave a nod, and Naruto bid farewell before heading out to locate Kakashi. Not surprisingly, he discovered his perverted teacher at the bookstore purchasing the most recent edition of that despised orange book. "Figures," he thought, and approached him. "Hey Kakashi-sensei, can I talk to you?" Kakashi simply turned around and nodded after observing the expression on his sensei's son's face. After they left the bookshop, Kakashi inquired as to what Naruto would like to discuss. In order to see if he could train the Hyuga, Naruto asked if they had any missions scheduled for tomorrow after explaining what had happened by the swing. After listening, Kakashi informed him that he had no issues with Naruto teaching her and that his only intention was to have them practice some D ranks. In fact, he instructed him to use Training Ground 7 and to ask for assistance if necessary. After thanking him, Naruto headed for his house, unsure of what he should do to help his new friend first. Tree swing outside the academy the following day. When Hinata saw Naruto leaning against the tree as she emerged from the academy, she instantly became alert. Naruto waved to her as soon as he saw her and made his way over. He jerked his head in the direction of the exit as he approached, and the two of them departed together after Hinata gave him a nod. Naruto glanced at his newest student and stated, "We're going to be going to my team's training grounds. We'll start once we're there." Hinata noticed the look and grinned at her new friend, saying, "Okay." Naruto simply smiled and took the lead. In the interim, Training Ground 7, the other members of Team 7 were waiting for Naruto to arrive with the new friend he would be assisting. The other two made the decision to see if they could assist at all after Kakashi and Naruto had explained to them what Naruto would be beginning to do today. Meanwhile, Hiza and Mado were engaged in a 2-on-1 duel with their silver-haired sensei. Mado threw a right hook at Kakashi and then pivoted when Kakashi dodged, turning it into a spin kick that made Kakashi approach the team's lone female member. "So what do you think Naruto will work on first today, sensei? Chakra control or taijutsu?" Mado asked. As he began blocking punches and kicks from the kunoichi and leaping away from a quick punch to gain some distance, Kakashi responded, "I would personally start with a little bit of taijutsu, but I think he wants to try chakra control first." Good one, Hiza. By the way, what do you think they'll work on first? He asked. With a simple shrug, Hiza closed the distance once more and began pursuing their teacher with Mado at her side. Can't say really. I mean, yeah, he said that he would work on those two first, but does it really matter in what order? I mean, sure, the Hyugas use extreme chakra control in their gentle fist style, and yes, Naruto has studied it somewhat. But does it really matter this early in the game? Mado dodged a roundhouse kick and attempted to enter his sensei's bubble with a kick of his own, but all he managed to do was force the Cyclops to take a step back to maintain space between them. Good point. This was the scene that Hinata and Naruto entered. Naruto merely laughed, but Hinata exhaled. Wow, that's amazing. Hiza heard him and exclaimed, "Hey Naruto. You just going to stand there or are you going to help?" Without even slowing down or averting her gaze from Kakashi. When Naruto made his signature entrance into a battle where the opponent is typically much slower than he is, Kakashi's eye widened. Remember how Naruto kicked the opponent's side of the face in the bell test when he was in the air? Kakashi was able to lessen the impact by rolling, but he had to immediately go on defense from all the kicks and punches that Naruto was delivering. In the meantime, Hiza and Mado moved to stand on either side of him, and the three of them surrounded their teacher. The four engaged in a fairly intense taijutsu match for about 2 minutes before Kakashi ended it so Naruto could begin instructing Hinata. Hyuga just said that while wearing a shocked, astonished expression. Hiza laughed when the four noticed this as they began to approach her. The three guys nearby laughed when she said, "I think we broke her." That was amazing. Can you really help me be able to fight like that? Hinata exclaimed as she awoke from her semi-trance and turned to face Naruto. Naruto gave a nod. Not all at once obviously. It'll take some time, but I'm sure that you can reach that point. Although you will have to do the most of it. I'm really just here to help you get started. All I can do is show you what to do. You are the only one who can decide how high you climb. After simply nodding, Hinata inquired as to what she needed to do. In order to determine where she could improve, Naruto spent the next hour and a half working on her taijutsu performance. He then worked on chakra control, showing her various exercises like tree climbing and leaf balancing. This continued for an additional 4 months. Naruto taught his friend some of the justice he knew because he was so impressed with her development. Naruto concluded that there wasn't much more he could teach Hinata after she eventually reached a point where she could compete with Mado and Hiza. The two grew close, and she would occasionally come find him if she was having problems, but most of the time it was just to hang out. Everyone in her class had observed her improvement, particularly in her self-confidence. Iruka made the decision one day to investigate the cause of the transformation. 2 months before graduation at Ninja Academy, Hinata left Iruka in awe. She went from having severe self-doubt and being among the worst students in her class in terms of taijutsu and other physical skills needed to ninja to being among the strongest and most self-assured. She was also much more forthcoming now. He once witnessed Hinata and her opponent square off against one another during a taijutsu test in which Mizuki was once again assisting him in testing the pupils. The opponent was a fangirl, a poor sap of a kunoichi. She was especially cruel and enjoyed making other people feel like dirt, which was the only thing that set this poor excuse of a ninja apart from the other fangirls. She assumed that Hinata's newly discovered confidence was a front and began disparaging her right away. She became very angry and rushed in when she was unable to get Hinata to bite. She said no. Hinata took a sidestep and dropped to one knee as she turned to face her opponent, just as she was about to get close. Her right arm slammed into the girl's stomach, sending her flying into the mat they were on, while her left arm swept the girl's legs out from under her. Mizuki called the match as soon as the girl's breath left her. While the rest of the snobs realized one crucial fact, that the new Hinata was not a mask and was here to stay. Hinata received a few cheers from her classmates. After congratulating Hinata, Iruka chose to inquire about the one question that was on everyone's mind. Very well done, Hinata. You've definitely improved. What have you been doing differently? Hinata blushed a little when she saw that everyone was staring at her. Well, you see, Iruka-sensei, I've been getting some help outside of class. Iruka decided to find out more information after raising an eyebrow at the blush in response. Can you be a little more specific, Hinata? What kind of help did you get? Was it with your father? No, sensei. I've been training with Naruto and the rest of Team 7, Hinata said, shaking her head. When Iruka and Mizuki heard this, they just started laughing, and everyone stared at them like they were crazy. After controlling his laughter, Mizuki remarked, well, that certainly explains it. That kid can be one harsh taskmaster. Believe me, I've seen what he does for training nowadays. Hinata simply grinned and nodded in agreement. Iruka, who had also managed to control his small outburst of laughter, chose to pose another query. So Hinata, how long have you been training with them? Everyone was impressed by Hinata's rapid growth when she said, well, Iruka-sensei, I started training with them about 4 months ago. Since this team was clearly skilled, one Uchiha in particular wanted to know if he could train with them. 2 weeks prior to the academy graduation exams, the hospital is a village hidden in the leaves. At the moment, Naruto was in a hospital hallway on the 2nd floor, staring out a window. His forehead rested on his arm, which was leaning against the window. Like a massive storm off one of the renowned Great Lakes, which are said to be on a different continent far from his home, his eyes were cloudy and roaring with emotion. To be clear, even though the elemental countries do resemble China, I'm adding it as a separate continent in case I make any Asian references. Because they were unsure of how he would react to their attempts to reach him, many people who wanted to come comfort him stayed away. Given how frequently his chakra flared, this was to be expected. He was continually feeling depressed about his friend's fate and angry at both the people who caused it and himself for not being able to stop it in the first place. His chakra would flare whenever he became angry with himself or the people he had killed. This would not happen frequently because, deep down, he knew that it would not be wise to let his chakra run wild in a hospital, but each time he did, a tiny aura would appear around the blonde. One that would sometimes contain the slightest hint of red. They also hung back because of this red tint that occasionally appeared. The boy was still in charge, and the nurses and doctors knew it. The issue wasn't that. The issue was that you would begin to truly feel what the child was feeling if you got too close while the red tint was present. The child's feelings were broadcast to a 5-foot radius around him by that red tint, which was similar to a radio tower. When that tint was present, anyone who attempted to approach him would gasp and quickly pull away. The Kyuubi was attempting to persuade them to simply leave his host and student alone so that he could solve his problems on his own, but they were unaware of this. However, he was prepared to take matters into his own hands if this continued. Naruto simply sighed and continued to go through his thought track. It's hard to rank my foot easily. We were outclassed, outnumbered, and outmatched. Even though we could have managed that mission if that information had been accurate, we should never have accepted it. I ought to have been more capable. Hiza and Mado might have perished as a result of my weakness. They'll be fortunate to remain ninja in a year as it is. I ought to have followed my gut. Flashback. Village hidden in the leaves. 4 days earlier, approaching Hokage Tower. In order to obtain a new mission, Team 7 was currently en route to the Hokage Tower. To keep their skills up to date, they intended to purchase another C rank. It was all well and good that they were getting better at sparring, but the allure of sparring every day was short-lived. Everyone on the team thought it would be a good idea to leave the village for a little while. When they reached the gate, the guards gave them a nod and allowed them to pass, and they proceeded to the floor where the missions are distributed. To the Genin's surprise, the team discovered that Iruka and Mizuki were currently working the desks alongside the Hokage once they arrived at the floor. The academy wouldn't be out for another month or so, but the two would frequently do this in the summer to maintain a consistent income. Observing the expressions on the faces of his former pupils, Iruka laughed and, before they could inquire, explained that one of the main water lines had broken when a student became overly excited about a water trick his family had taught him, inadvertently causing the water from the main pipe to follow him. At that, Naruto shook his head. The man apparently hadn't even mastered the Just You, which would have given him the ability to control the source of the attack's water. Now, the entire first floor was being depleted today because one student hadn't completed one Just You. Even though the Hokage still thought it was kind of funny, the thought of all the paperwork he had to do as a result, shadow clones or not, still made him sick. Sarutobi looked up at the team that was fast becoming one of his favorites and shook his head to shake off that specific memory. Additionally, it's not just because Naruto is in it. This team's record was nearly flawless. They nearly always returned to the village unscathed and completed their missions on schedule. They didn't let it get to them, though, in contrast to most teams that achieved that level of success. He was happy that the team members shared the quality of confidence rather than arrogance. Those three were not scared to acknowledge their limitations because they were aware of them. He decided that now was not the time to think along those lines, and he started moving forward with a smile on his face. Hello Team 7. Here for your usual, or would you like another C rank? As his three charges nodded their heads, Kakashi responded, C rank if you please, Hokage-sama. We all feel that we need to get out of the village for a couple of days at least. Sarutobi nodded, understanding that even though Naruto's shadow clones handle the majority of their work, The team needed to occasionally leave the village to maintain their skills and enjoy a change of scenery. Very well, let's see what we have. He took out the C-rank missions list and started perusing them. He read them out to them after noticing a few of them. All right, we have a simple courier mission to the capital, nothing special on that one, just sending a few documents to the daimyo. There is also another courier mission to the Sand Village, again nothing special on that one. And finally, we have a bandit elimination problem. A group of bandits have been striking a few of the merchant supply caravans that are usually sent here. We believe that they are a relatively small group. The caravans that are usually attacked carry supplies such as emergency grain and medical supplies. Although a few have been ninja supply caravans which lead us to believe that they are opportunity strikes and that they sell off what they don't want. Which will it be? He was looking up. Kakashi glanced at his team and saw Naruto crack his knuckles without realizing it. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the blonde, who became somewhat embarrassed after realizing what he had done. With his trademark smile, Kakashi said, "I take it you want to take the bandit mission, Naruto?" "Yeah, I guess. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm fine with any of them, but it could be a good workout." Kakashi accepted the mission scroll for the bandit mission while the other two merely nodded their heads in agreement with their teammate. He glanced at the scroll, opened it, and instructed his team to gather their supplies for a mission that could last up to a week, and to meet him at the North Gate within an hour. To the surprise of their former teachers, who stared at Kakashi as if he had grown a second head, all three shushined away and nodded. The Hokage simply decided to give the copy nin a raised eyebrow. When Kakashi saw, his face, or what was visible of it anyway, expressed, "What?" before he too departed in a puff of smoke. North Gate of Hidden Leaf Village, 58 minutes later. Everyone was waiting for Naruto to arrive at the North Gate. Given that Naruto typically arrived at a meeting location at least 5 minutes prior to the scheduled time, the other three thought this was a little strange. He occasionally arrived late, but always for a valid reason. They turned around when they heard a puff of smoke and saw Naruto standing behind them. Hinata smiled at her friend and said, "There you are. We were starting to worry about you, Naruto." Naruto simply grinned and began massaging the nape of his neck. "Sorry guys," he said, "but I still feel bad about that half hour ago. I had a brief run-in with Konohamaru on the way here." He looked down for a moment and thought, "I better stay on guard." Then he raised his head. The others nodded, and they started to depart from the village. "So we going now or what?" they asked. 2 hours north of the Hidden Leaf is a forest in the Land of Fire. Hinata, Kakashi, and Mado were beginning to worry about their blonde friend. He was quieter than usual on missions, it's true, but this was crazy. His expression remained solemn, as though he was trying to solve a puzzle but was not making any progress. Mado finally had enough. He turned in midair and glanced at Naruto to make sure he knew where to land next. He said, "Hey Naruto. What's wrong?" Before landing and launching himself again. He didn't even look down as he approached the branch, but he did glance over his shoulder as he launched himself again. He went on, still facing his teammate. "You've been like this ever since we left the village. What's bothering you?" Naruto was simply saying, "I honestly don't know, Mado. I've been having this feeling since before we left, but for the life of me I can't figure out what." "Maybe it's just nerves," Hinata said with a simple shrug. "Yeah, but why would I be nervous about going against a bandit camp? It's not like this is the first bandit raid we've done, and I didn't feel anything like this the first 2 times, he said. Kakashi decided to share his thoughts after turning his head from his position at the front. The trio of young shinobi nodded their heads and went on, saying, "Although I highly doubt that we will run into serious trouble on this mission, Naruto, it is best to follow your gut if it is telling you something. All 3 of you be on guard." The following day the group had taken just over 24 hours to get close to the area where raids were typically conducted. Even though they could have arrived much sooner, the group chose to move more slowly in order to conserve their energy. When they arrived at the location indicated by their mission scroll, Kakashi nodded to Naruto, who knew what to do to help them find their target because he had done this in past bandit raids. He swiftly gathered a sizable contingent of shadow clones around him after going over the required hand signals. The original bit his thumb and began making hand signals after he had made the clones. He slammed his palm on the ground after a brief sequence, and a lot of pops and a big cloud of smoke were heard. There was a sizable pack of normal-sized kitsune when the smoke had cleared. "Did you forget he could do that?" The original fox nodded, and the pack split up right away, with each fox going to a different shadow clone. The pack knew what to do because they had done this before. While Naruto waited with another fox, this one a little bigger, each pair of clones and foxes went off to see what they could find. As the pack's general leader, this one would remain with the original to assist with coordination should he decide to keep the pack. The bandit camp was soon discovered by the pack. Naruto immediately remembered the pack, and upon their return, they promptly informed the others of their observations. When everyone returned, the lead fox said, "Report." A senior fox stated, "Naruto-sama, the camp is approximately 20 miles from here and consists of about 30 or some bandits. They are situated in a group of tents that while are sturdy they look like they can be moved easily. I believe that they move around every once in a while to stay hidden." Even though everyone heard him, Matto muttered to himself, "Didn't work this time." Naruto nodded to the fox to continue, and it did. While most of the tents look like they can only hold 1 or 2 people at most, there were 2 tents that were considerably larger than the others. One of which smelled heavily of steel and iron. I believe it is safe to assume it's where they keep their weapons. The humans nodded at this. The other tent smells more like a tavern and is most likely where they have their meetings. Another nod. The camp is located in a small clearing with a sentry's post hidden in the trees around the clearing halfway between each compass point. Means instead of the usual NESW you have them at NE Northwest SESW. There is 1 archer in each post. That is all. Given that there were only 30 bandits, Naruto nodded and made the decision to send the pack home because his clones should be able to easily defeat them at that low number. The entire pack returned to their summoning realm with a yip. That was a grave error on his part, as Naruto would soon discover. Because these were not your typical bandits, as the pack and shinobi were unaware. They were missing nin who used only taijutsu and ordinary weapons to keep that small secret. After half an hour in order to protect themselves, the group chose to use an exploding version of Naruto's shadow clones. Messy, but the most effective way to handle the group. What they hadn't anticipated, though, was that these bandits could infer that something wasn't right when the clones only entered the camp and dispersed uniformly. All of them used substitution justice just prior to blowing up. The missing nin located Team 7's location immediately following the explosion, and then everything went haywire. Alongside Team 7, after hearing the explosion, Team 7 prepared to evacuate in order to tend to any remaining members. They were traveling when they were confronted by a group of alleged bandits. One of the nuke nins flared to alert the others as soon as they spotted them. It was all one big mess after that. Naruto managed to eliminate a large number of shadow clones, but none of them could do much because the ninjas continued to use wide-range attacks to eliminate them all at once. Before chaos broke out, the team managed to hold out for roughly 30 minutes. Naruto's perspective. "Man, I should have paid attention to that feeling, I knew. As I dodged a man brandishing a 6-foot blade like a twig, I thought, I'm not sure how much longer we can continue this." Suddenly, I heard someone scream in agony. I swiftly made 2 hand signals and grabbed the man's wrist after spotting an opening. In a matter of seconds, more than 1,000 bolts passed through the man, and he instantly lit up like a Christmas tree as soon as I made contact. Now that he was out of my way, I turned to see Hiza holding a bunch of arrows out of her and a hand over her left shoulder. Even though Matto was standing above her, he wasn't much better. The two were suddenly struck by a terrible windstorm that swiftly tore through their bodies. When I saw 4 ninjas approaching to finish them off, I killed the bastard right away by blasting the person who did it with my own wind attack, demonstrating that they were still alive. I focused all of my chakra on my legs after realizing they were powerless and prayed to God that I would arrive in time. Hiza's perspective. We were in big trouble, and I knew it. I had suffered an electrical attack that severely accelerated my reaction time. I was immediately hit by a barrage of arrows and struck by an earth spear that went straight through my left shoulder. In an attempt to defend me, Matto stood over me, but he was struck by the same electrical attack and was hit by more arrows. Suddenly, I heard a sound that indicated we were in serious danger. I'm positive Matto heard, wind style, stripping wind justu. And we both made an effort to move aside. However, we were struck head-on because our bodies refused to move. My body ached so much that I thought I might have lost a limb or two. Then, fortunately for me, Naruto launched another wind attack. Wind style. Wind scythe justu. I knew he had killed the other guy even though I couldn't see it. I knew this was it when Matto and I suddenly saw 4 men brandishing swords at us. I closed my eyes and awaited the pain, but then I heard a squelch and felt a warm liquid strike me. As soon as I opened my eyes, they widened in horror at what I saw. Matto's perspective. I knew that we were in serious trouble, and despite my best efforts to keep Hiza safe, I ended up suffering just as much, if not more, harm. The wind felt like it was going through a blender as it passed right through my body. I somehow knew Naruto killed the person who sent the other wind just you after hearing him cast his own. I let out a sigh of relief in my head. I didn't believe I could withstand such an assault again. I watched as 4 ninjas suddenly landed on a branch in front of us. They all carried swords, and I could tell by the smiles on their faces that this was it. They abruptly accelerated toward Hiza and me, and I caught a glimpse of her closing hers out of the corner of my eye. A blur flashed out of the corner of my eye and came to a stop directly in front of us, but I kept my own eyes open, determined not to give those bastards the satisfaction that would give them. I caught a glimpse of Naruto facing the ninjas with his arms extended before they reached us. My eyes widened at once when. Normal point of view. Squeal ch. Naruto had barely made it in front of his teammates before they saw him. But it came at a terrible cost. 4 swords now passed through his body and ended at his hilts. He had punctures in his kidney, stomach, and lungs. He turned to look over his shoulder at Mato and Hiza, who both had horrified expressions on their faces and blood all over their bodies, after noticing the shock on the nin's faces at what had just transpired. He asked, "Are you guys all right?" And Mato gave him a numb nod. One of the 4 ninjas drew their swords as the others grinned. Then one of them raised his voice. As the saying goes, well, I guess it's true what they say. You Leaf Ninja will give your lives for each other. Too bad you're all going to die anyway. Although I guess the 2 of you are lucky to have a friend willing to die for you. But it's over now. The 4 then took over to complete the task when suddenly. Kyuubi's perspective, as the human he has come to call his son and his teammates tried to escape the overkill that the so-called bandits were turning into, Kyuubi watched from inside the seal. He couldn't help but be proud of how well he and his friends were doing, despite his fearful observation. Out of nowhere, he heard a familiar voice scream in agony. His son saw the other 2 brats in terrible shape together on a tree branch when he turned around. He suddenly sensed that the wind was being controlled, and as they attempted to move their unconscious bodies to clear the area, an attack struck them squarely in the face. He sensed his son's shock and anger instantly, and then he killed the person who dared to attack his friends in that way by controlling the wind as well. His son knew instantly what was going to happen when he turned his head again and saw the 4 ninja with the swords. Even though he thought, this is going to hurt like hell, his son invested all of his chakra in his legs, and Kyuubi contributed some of his own to help. Suddenly, he experienced excruciating pain that tore directly through his son's nervous system. His anger was gradually growing as he listened to the nins laughing and making fun of his son while he watched his son ask his teammates if they were okay. With only one thought going through his mind, red chakra began to flow past the seal just as the ninjas were approaching. You bastards, don't do it this time. Kakashi's perspective. Kakashi was struggling a little too. He had turned to using his Chidori in a manner similar to Naruto's use of his chakra hands, and he was slicing through the ninja whenever he could. However, maintaining the Chidori in that state was exhausting, and his chakra was depleting. The last bastard around him had just been defeated when he heard a scream. He turned to see the nin hurl a wind just you at 2 of his pupils. They were struck squarely, and he watched in increasing horror. He witnessed the man turn his head and instantly turn into a blur after Naruto struck him with one of his own wind attacks, killing him by beheading him. When Kakashi witnessed 4 swords pierce his sensei's son's chest, his horror only increased. He was filled with anger and grief when he suddenly felt a chakra that he had not felt in almost 13 years. Hell suddenly made an appearance on Earth. Normal point of view. Suddenly, Naruto was surrounded by red chakra, which totally healed his wounds. At first, the ninjas began to back off out of fear, but then something happened that made them literally urinate. The child appeared to be a giant one-tailed fox after the chakra transformed into a fox head and then enveloped him in what could only be described as a cloak of chakra. However, they were frightened by more than just appearance. It was the emotion it gave them. They knew they were dead, and it was as if the devil himself was present. Naruto got to his feet and killed the 4 right away by slicing a horizontal cut through them, sending them falling and separating their 2 halves as they went. Remember Darth Maul's fate in episode 1. 12 of the 30 ninjas present at the camp had not yet joined the battle, remaining in reserve while the other ninjas engaged in combat and defeated the intruders. These guys knew they were the weaker group and hung back, believing they could handle any after the others had finished fighting, even though some would call that cowardice. They thought it would all be over soon and laughed when they saw what had happened to the 3 children. They were correct, but not in the sense they had assumed. When the red chakra emerged and the blonde child used only his chakra-covered arm to cut through the other 4 ninja, they watched in horrified horror. When the child, whom they now realized was a demon disguised as a human, turned to face them, Their horror reached new heights. After that, nothing remained of them. What had happened was unclear to the other 3 members of Team 7. Naruto and his 2 teammates were on the branch for a brief moment. The next moment, he was beside the 12 ninja who had not joined in, and the only indication that they had ever been there was a collection of limbs scattered all over the place. Naruto fell to his knees and began to pant as the red chakra returned to his body a second later. After taking a few deep breaths, he returned to his 2 teammates, who merely gazed at him in awe and mild fear. Kakashi also approached and began examining his charges. Recognizing that even though some of the wounds were undoubtedly serious, they weren't immediately life-threatening if they received the right first aid. Before rushing as quickly as they could to the leaf with the 2 on their backs, he and Naruto began bandaging the 2 as best they could. It will take an hour to reach the hidden leaf village. In order to get their teammates to safety, Naruto and Kakashi were moving as fast as they could. While it had previously taken them over a day to reach the camp, they were now sprinting like hellhounds, reducing the journey time to 5 hours. A kind of semi-consciousness had been slipping in and out of Mado and Hiza. While they were awake, they were both attempting to determine what had happened to their best friend. When Mado finally lost it, he asked Kakashi behind his back what had happened. Naruto let out a sigh because he most certainly did not want his friends to learn about his adoptive father in this manner. With a heavy heart, he explained to the 2 what had actually happened nearly 13 years prior and how the Kyuubi, who was now more like a father to him than anything else, had trained him. The revelation that Naruto had been keeping from them for so long shocked the 2, but they also realized that it explained a lot about the blonde, particularly the looks he used to get from the villagers and how he always seemed to recover so fast. The 2 were instantly taken aback when Naruto said that he would understand if they decided they no longer wanted to be his friends. Mado could only nod his head in agreement with Hiza's response, which Naruto desperately needed to hear. Why would we want to no longer be friends? You are a jail, not the prisoner. And by the sounds of things, that prisoner didn't do what he did on his own free will either. You both have gone through so much that has not been your fault. It wouldn't be right to leave you, nor do we want to. Naruto and his inner Kyuubi were both appreciative of the 2. Both Naruto and Kakashi were relieved to hear what they did and went on their way. Hospital at Hidden Leaf. The 2 remaining ninja were escorted to the hospital as soon as they arrived at the gates, where medical personnel promptly took the 2 injured and began treating them. After that, the copy nin and his pupil waited for the doctors to arrive for several hours. When they did, they delivered news that left the 2 completely stunned. Hiza and Mado had suffered too much physical harm. Even though they were severely damaged by the arrows and lightning-style Just You attacks, the last wind Just You was the final straw. Their arms and legs were essentially worthless because it had sliced through the bones and muscles. The harm had been done, even though the doctors had been able to recover from their wounds. The injuries had been so bad that it would take at least a year for the 2 to consider performing better than AD rank, and even then, it would take at least 2 months while their bodies were retaught how to move correctly. The likelihood that the 2 could never be ninja again was actually 5%. After being shocked to learn of this, Naruto blamed himself for the incident and fell into a deep depression. While I understand that some of you are wondering why the 2 did not body flicker to the village, the answer is straightforward. The Shushine technique is not a long-range teleport technique. It has a limited range, so using it to make jumps when they were in a great hurry would be counterproductive. Instead, they could use their chakra in a more traditional manner. Flashback end. Naruto's thoughts were disorganized. Both the demon and the host sensed a familiar presence approaching just as Kyuubi was ready to drag his son into his mindscape and give the child a reality check. Suddenly, the 2 felt a pair of well-built, slender arms encircle the blonde's waist. When Hinata heard her classmates Sakura and Ino discussing how Ino had witnessed a silver-haired Junin and a blonde child racing to the hospital with 2 children on their backs, she knew what had happened. She hurried to the hospital right away and inquired about the situation when she discovered Kakashi sobbingly leaning against a wall. She was instantly astounded by what had transpired after hearing Kakashi's account. Naruto would occasionally take her into his mindscape to train with the fox because the big guy believed he could show her a few things while he was in human form, so she was aware of the Kyuubi. She had been horrified to hear that the boy she had grown so close to had been killed at school for possessing a demon she had been taught. He was thankful that it didn't alter her opinion of him. When she went to look for her favorite blonde friend after her conversation with the scarecrow-like Junin, she discovered him leaning against a window with his chakra pulsing, sometimes turning red when someone approached too closely. Knowing instinctively what was happening, she approached her first true friend and put her arms around him, making him tense a little. "Don't worry, Naruto. Everything will be all right. I'm here for you." She whispered into his ear as she stood up a little on her toes. Hidden Leaf Village. Bandit mission, day after. The village quickly learned of Naruto's team's predicament. People were perplexed as to how a mission could have such poor intel. The question that almost everyone had was how a genin team that had only been together for a year or so could have survived that without any genins actually dying. Since Naruto had demonstrated that he was a one-man army, the majority of the younger groups assumed that he had simply overwhelmed the missing nins with so many that they had to fall. But the majority of the more experienced ninjas had another plan. When things got difficult, they thought Naruto had somehow summoned the power of the Kyuubi. Some of them were surprised to discover they were correct when they challenged Kakashi about this notion. If Kakashi hadn't told them exactly how it happened, there would have been widespread panic. The older shinobi understood that the blonde had no say in the matter after learning about the circumstances they were in at the time. They were relieved to learn that he dropped the chakra cloak as soon as all of the enemy nin were defeated, even though they were worried that he had done it at all. They all decided to keep the fact that Naruto had used the Kyuubi's chakra to themselves and to try their best to prevent the younger group from learning the truth by spreading the rumor about the Shadow Clone Army. Needless to say, Naruto was incredibly appreciative of them when he learned of this. The Hokage, meanwhile, had determined that Naruto was not mentally capable of serving on active duty at this time and granted him and Kakashi a week off to allow him to recover. Speaking of Naruto, Hinata was helping him deal with the situation fairly well. The day he returned, they had a lengthy conversation, and she was able to lift his spirits. As a result of their increased time spent together, the two became more than just friends. They were also becoming close, even though they weren't yet in a romantic relationship. For the next few weeks, Hinata and Naruto were nearly always spotted together in the afternoons, whether they were training or simply lounging around the village. Iruka and Mizuki also offered assistance. They each had their own conversations with the blonde, but Mizuki went one step further and assisted Naruto in pulling off a few practical jokes to relieve some of his tension. The fact that he painted the Hokage monument with the hair of each face having a different tie-dye color was what really worked for him. Though some momentarily questioned whether he could actually perform genjutsu, no one knew how he did it undetected until he was finished. Rock Lee was the only other person who truly made Naruto's recovery possible. Lee would put the sapphire-eyed boy through his paces by challenging him at least once a day. Naruto benefited from this since it forced him to focus on improving with each match in addition to distracting him from the mission. By the end of the week, the blonde had returned to his normal self and was prepared to return to active duty. Naruto and Kakashi were only a two-man team, so until they found new teammates, they could only perform D ranks, even though Naruto was psychologically prepared to return to active duty. Furthermore, neither Naruto nor Kakashi want to wait for his two teammates to fully recover, even though Naruto had been relieved to learn that they would be in no more than a year. Therefore, it was agreed that two of the academy students who would be graduating in a week would be sent to Kakashi. Unfortunately, the council had different plans than Naruto's, who had hoped to recruit Hinata as one of his new teammates. Since Kakashi possessed the Sharingan, they had essentially ordered him to battle the final Uchiha. The issue wasn't this alone, though. The issue was that Sasuke won Rookie of the Year, and the best kunoichi were always chosen for the team. Even though Hinata had been making great strides, she was still only a few steps behind another girl. The first is Sakura Haruno. When Naruto learned, he became certain that the council was trying to defraud him. When the Hokage brought it up at a council meeting, the council declared that rules were rules, despite his request to have the Hyuga heiress join his team. Ordinarily, Naruto would have been okay with the Uchiha as well. Indeed, he was a haughty jerk with a worse sense of superiority than Neji, his classmate. However, Naruto was confident that if necessary, he could make the so-called genius see sense. No, Hinata's claim that this Haruno girl was the worst type of kunoichi available, a fangirl, was what truly infuriated Naruto. He moaned when he heard this and asked Iruka to show him the girl's statistics. When he was informed that she would be his teammate, Iruka allowed him to view the girl's records. When Naruto realized that she was only the best kunoichi because of her book smarts, he was not impressed. Naruto was prepared to give the girl a chance, though, in the hopes that he could help her move past her fangirl phase. In his book, the worst kind of ninja, aside from those who violate oaths, was someone who turned into a ninja in order to pursue another person. According to Naruto, it's okay if you prove yourself. However, you are a waste of the teacher's time and effort if you do it in an attempt to win a boy or girl. Hinata and Naruto agreed to meet up as frequently as possible between training and missions, despite the fact that they both knew they couldn't be on the same team. Naruto advised Hinata to continue approaching him whenever he was in the village if she ever needed assistance with her training. Naruto and Kakashi decided to give Hinata special training every day after the academy to prepare her for the big day because the graduation exam was approaching and she was 2 members away from being able to go on missions outside of the village. Hinata was very grateful for this, and by the end of the week, she felt prepared to face the test head-on. Team 7's training grounds on graduation day for Naruto and Kakashi. The day was essentially the same as the remainder of the week. Naruto had walked Hinata to the academy that morning, which was one change. Naruto had wished her luck and given her a cheek kiss when they arrived at the academy. Hinata blushed deeply because she was still occasionally in awe of Naruto. Naruto laughed when he saw how flushed she was, and he quickly said goodbye and gave them hell. Hinata blushed and giggled a little at this, then nodded and entered the academy, prepared for whatever lay ahead. Mizuki was leaning against a wall when this occurred, and Naruto happened to be watching with a big smile on his face. Mizuki started laughing as Naruto simply arched an eyebrow as though to ask, "What?" Naruto had waved and gone to meet Kakashi at the training grounds, rolling his eyes and shaking his head slightly. Thus, we arrive at the present. Standing opposite each other, Naruto and Kakashi were both panting. The two had been fighting all morning long since they had first met at the training grounds, only taking a brief break for lunch before continuing their battle. On days when they would be practicing taijutsu, this wasn't particularly unusual, but today was nearly entirely ninjutsu, and the two had never continued this long using only that style of fighting. Even though neither of them had used any lethal techniques, they had used so many justice per minute that bystanders would have assumed that the 4th grade shinobi war was in progress. Hinata entered this scene grinning, but as she watched, her expression swiftly changed to one of utter amazement. Hinata's perspective: "I felt really good about myself as I made my way from the academy to Naruto's training grounds. I couldn't wait to inform Naruto and Kakashi-sensei that I had aced the graduation exam. I could hear the two fighting ninjutsu when I got close, but I didn't really pay any attention because I assumed they were just practicing. All of that changed when I entered smiling, only to have my eyes widen at what I saw." Kakashi-sensei had just launched a massive water dragon at Naruto, who promptly defended with a water wall and fired water bullets in response. Taking a cue from his sensei, Naruto countered with an earth wall and fired earth bullets at his teacher, who responded with a lightning move that resembled a bunch of senbon needles exploding. Remember Sasuke's Chidori attack against Deidara? The majority of the needles were stopped when they struck the earth bullets, but a sizable number continued to approach Naruto, who swiftly knocked out the Just You with one of his wind justice. Upon witnessing this, Kakashi exploited the wind by directing a fire Just You in the direction of his pupil. As soon as the fire got to him, Naruto called forth a wall of water, which the flames instantly struck, encasing him in a cloud of steam. I was astounded by how quickly their hands moved in the hand signals they were using, and all of this occurred in roughly 15 seconds. Normal point of view: Naruto was taking a moment to catch his breath by using the steam cloud. He noticed Hinata standing at the training grounds entrance as it subsided and he was getting ready to fight it again. As Kakashi looked in that direction, he also saw Hinata. After glancing at Hinata, Naruto questioned, "What?" "Sorry, it's just that I've never seen anyone use justice that fast before," Hinata said, shaking herself out of her daze. With a laugh, Kakashi remarked, "Well, Hinata, if you thought that was fast, you should see Naruto when he gets serious." Hinata let out a gasp and turned to face Naruto, who had the grace to blush a little and scratch the back of his head while chuckling. "Ah, don't listen to him, Hinata. I'm not that fast." Kakashi simply laughed and didn't say anything more. Recalling her reason for coming, Hinata told the two about her exam performance, and they assured her that they never doubted her ability to perform well. The three decided to go to Ichiraku's to celebrate. Day of team placement at Hidden Leaf Village Academy. As Hinata sat down to think about how unfair it was that she couldn't be on Naruto's team on the morning of the team placements, she couldn't help but sigh. At least she was aware that Kurenai, her previous teacher, would be her new sensei. Since the death of her mother, she has always been a mother figure to her. She let out another sigh as Sakura and Ino, Sasuke's two biggest fangirls, arrived at the door and began arguing over who should sit next to their Sasuke. It's hard to think Sakura would be on his team rather than mine. Hinata placed her head on the desk and waited for Iruka to enter, thinking, but I bet she will be happy to know that her precious Sasuke will be on her team. He did soon after, and as soon as he had everyone's attention, he began to deliver the speech he always gives to his graduating class. Then he began enumerating the team assignments. Up until he got to Team 7, everything was fine. Iruka said, Team 7 will consist of Sasuke Uchiha, said Imo looked up, and Sakura Haruno. However, Sakura interrupted, yelling something about true love winning out. She sat down after receiving a glare from Iruka and the majority of the girls, and Iruka went on. Due to certain events, you two will be joining the members of last year's Team 7. Your sensei will be Kakashi Hitaki and your fellow genin will be Naruto Uzumaki. I suggest you two listen to both of them. The entire class began to whisper when Naruto's name was called, occasionally glancing at Hinata, who sank slightly into her seat as she became apprehensive from all the attention. It seemed strange to Sasuke and Sakura that they were joining a team that had been formed the previous year, and they wondered what had happened to the other two members. Sakura pondered, I wonder why it's just these Naruto and Kakashi people. Kakashi and Naruto, huh? Recalling what Iruka and Mizuki had said about Naruto some time ago when Hinata had smashed the fangirl, Sasuke thought, looks like I get to have some training with the guy after all. After completing the team formations, Iruka informed the students that they had an hour off before returning to class to meet their new Junin instructors. To the surprise of everyone else, Hinata shushed out of the classroom after hearing this. When did she acquire that skill? Before recalling that Naruto had told him that Kakashi had taught him, Mato, and Hiza how to do it, but that they only did it when they were pressed for time, Iruka pondered. He laughed as he left the classroom, thinking, I guess Naruto and Kakashi taught her more than just taijutsu. Hinata grinned as she observed the class's reactions from a tree branch outside the classroom. She thought to herself, damn that felt good, and then she leapt to find her two new teammates. In case you haven't noticed, she has been influenced by Naruto's tendency to pull practical jokes. An hour later all of the students were back in the classroom waiting for their new teachers when the hour was up. The first one appeared after just a minute or two, and the class was astonished. As they had anticipated, an adult entered through the door, but instead a boy with blonde hair, whiskers on his cheeks, and the bluest eyes they had ever seen entered and proceeded to the teacher's desk. Though he said it in a courteous manner, practically everyone could hear the underlying message that it wasn't a request. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. Will Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno please come with me? The two students had different ideas as they were getting up. The Hyuga were trained by this person. He doesn't look like much, Sasuke thought, considering taking him. You won't live forever, child. Who am I kidding? He seems kind of cute. He's attractive. Sakura and the majority of the girls noticed a very well-toned, muscular body that spoke of years of training, but not as much as Sasuke-kun. He was surveying the remainder of the classroom as the two descended to the level at which Naruto was. When he saw Hinata, he smiled at her, and she smiled back. He gave Hinata a nod when the two rookies approached him, then led his new charges out of the classroom and into the village, thinking, this should be interesting. Traveling to the Memorial Stone in Hidden Leaf Village, Naruto escorted his two new teammates out of the academy and began making his way to his training grounds, more precisely, the nearby Memorial Stone. Naruto made the decision to fairly warn the rookies about what to anticipate from him and Kakashi as they were leaving the academy. He began speaking as they passed the gate, attracting the two's interest. All right guys, since we're going to be a team now, there are a few things you should know about me and Kakashi-sensei. First and foremost, if we tell you to do something, you do it. We won't be trying to make you go through any sick initiation rites or anything like that. We personally find them a waste of time. That being said, if we tell you to do 50 jumping jacks while singing the alphabet, we expect you to do exactly that. Both rookies looked at like he was crazy, but Naruto ignored them. Second, and you will have to forgive us for this, but we are still recovering a little bit about what happened to our team. Sakura used this as an opportunity to inquire about her thoughts upon learning that they would be joining an older team. Naruto, I've been wondering. What happened to make your team lose two teammates? His face became serious before he continued, bad intel. Now don't interrupt me. As I was saying, Kakashi and I are still handling it, so you will have to deal with a few perks. While I've been able to cope a lot better, Kakashi has taken to short periods of brooding, though not often. One other thing, Kakashi will probably be an hour late at most meetings, and before you ask, it's because he is remembering things. Me and my teammates had gotten him out of that in the past year, but with what happened 2 weeks ago, he slipped back into it, although fortunately it's not as bad as before. I'm still working on getting him out. But know this, once he gets his head on straight, he is one hell of a teacher and he does not take upstarts lightly. At this point he turns to Sasuke and continues, neither him nor I care for names. You earn your place with us. Don't expect us to baby you either. You better know right here and right now that I will make your life a living hell if you don't pull your own weight. While Sakura was beginning to feel anxious, Sasuke simply laughed at this, believing that Naruto could not possibly carry out that threat. That said, he went on, "I promise you will emerge much better than when you arrived if you follow our instructions." He then fell silent as they continued to walk to their destination. I understand that Naruto's attitude has changed significantly, but keep in mind that he recently lost his two best friends as teammates and finds Sasuke's "I'm better than you" mentality really annoying. At the memorial stone, Kakashi was reflecting on how he had lost his own team and now nearly lost two of his students in a similar way. As he promised himself to do his best for his students, he thought to himself, "I promise Obito, I will do my best to keep your nephew safe, and I won't let anything happen to your son either, sensei." Abruptly, he felt a presence that he has come to love, like an uncle to a beloved nephew. Naruto was present. When the Genin and two Genin aspirants arrived at Team 7's training area, they saw Kakashi kneeling beside some kind of memorial stone. Naruto spoke up despite knowing his teacher was aware of their presence. After a brief pause to gather his thoughts, Kakashi simply nodded slightly, indicating that he had heard the statement, "Kakashi-sensei, I've brought our new teammates." He got to his feet, turned around, and smiled briefly at Naruto, who returned the smile before turning to face his new charges. My first impression of you two, you got a rude awakening ahead of you." The two hopefuls appeared surprised, and Sasuke became enraged at once. His voice was sharp as he asked, "And what's that supposed to mean?" As soon as Naruto swept his legs, he regretted asking. He looked up to see Naruto frowning down at him. "It means that you have a long way to go, Uchiha, and I would watch what you say around us." Sakura frowned as she watched, assuming Naruto was being a bit rough, but she explained it away by saying that he missed his old teammates. After helping Sasuke up and letting out a sigh, Kakashi turned to Naruto and said, "I'll take him." Naruto simply nodded and placed a hand on Sakura's shoulder. The two shushined their new charges out of the area before she or Sasuke could inquire about their activities. The academy's rooftop. When the smoke cleared, Sakura realized, "We're back at the academy." As they passed her, Kakashi walked around and leaned against the rail facing him, while Naruto leapt over the back of a bench that was there and sat on its end. Kakashi nodded when Naruto said softly, "Boy, this brings back memories." "Well, aren't you going to join us?" Kakashi asked after they both realized the two had not followed. With Sakura in the center and Sasuke at the end, both hopefuls began and approached Naruto to sit next to him. After they were all seated, Kakashi said, "All right, you three, let's introduce and talk a little about ourselves so that we know a little bit about each other." Sakura said, "What do you mean, sensei?" as Naruto rolled his eyes a little. "What is your maximum thickness?" It's unbelievable that she received the highest book smarts ranking. "You know, your likes, dislikes, dreams, and hobbies. Stuff like that," Kakashi replied. Why don't you go first so that we get an idea?" Sakura responded. Naruto and Kakashi looked at how ironic Sakura and Hisa's remarks were. "At least Hisa wanted me, sensei, to go first to get to know me, him," was what both of us thought. I know. It's always the girl, isn't it? But believe me, that's the extent of her and Hisa's similarities. Oh my god, she still doesn't understand after sensei gave it to her in the most straightforward manner possible. How was this girl able to make it through the academy? Naruto pondered in his mind. Despite having similar ideas, Kakashi chose to comply. "Very well. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I'm the kind of person who doesn't feel like talking about his likes and dislikes. My dreams for the future are none of your business, but anyway, I have lots of hobbies." Naruto started laughing, and Sakura and Sasuke both started to perspire. The two pondered. He said so much, but we only learned his name. Naruto thought of something quite different. I really should have anticipated that. Never assume that Kakashi-sensei lacks a sense of humor. While the other two were wondering what kind of team they were on, Kakashi, who had a good idea of what Naruto was thinking, also laughed. When Sakura finally had enough, she asked, "What's so funny?" The two older men stopped laughing, and Naruto simply replied, "Inside joke." The pink-haired girl gave Kakashi a glare when he said, "All right, now that I've gone, it's your turn. Why don't you start, Pinky?" "All right. My name is Sakura Haruno. I like," glances at Sasuke with a blush, "I dislike Ino. My hobby is," again looks at emo kid this time with a blush. "My dream," again looks at duckbutt and lets out a small squeal. Naruto thought, "Great, she's worse than I thought," and Kakashi had a similar thought. Looks like Naruto wasn't kidding when he said we had a lot of work to do on this one. Kakashi pointed to the Uchiha and said, "You with the duck butt hairdo." Naruto laughed and the emo gave him a glare. "And before you all say anything, I realize that I am being cruel to him, but depending on the story, I can occasionally imagine a scenario in which he and Naruto are best friends and even brothers in blood. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. There are plenty of things I hate, but I don't see that it matters, considering there is almost nothing I do like. It seems pointless to talk about dreams. That's just a word, but what I do have is determination. I plan to restore my clan, and there's someone I have sworn to kill." Sakura looked at him and thought, he is so cool. Naruto and Kakashi exchanged a glance before Naruto muttered something. "Idiot." Sakura became enraged after everyone heard him and attempted to strike Naruto in the head, but he grabbed her wrist before she could raise it all the way. The fact that he accomplished this without ever averting his gaze from his teacher, however, truly astounded the two hopefuls. Sasuke was taken aback, wondering what else he could do if he could accomplish that without looking. His arrogance quickly overcame him, though, and he said in a risky voice, "Care to repeat that, Uzumaki?" Blonde simply sighed. When the Uchiha kept glaring at him, he went on, "I said you were an idiot. I know that you lost your clan and that you are in pain and angry at the one who did it. But having nothing but hate gets you nowhere. I will respect your wish to get justice for what has happened, but if you can't find something to protect in the meantime, then you are only limiting yourself." Sasuke was at his breaking point. He grabbed Naruto's collar, jerked the blonde across Sakura's face, and did it directly. "What would you know of my loss? You lost 2 teammates who, I might add, are still alive. What do you know about losing your whole clan? Or about the pain of being alone? Huh? Answer me." While Kakashi had a single thought, Sakura was startled by the outburst and beginning to feel afraid. He's done it now. With a calm voice that made even Kakashi shudder, Naruto stared into the last Uchiha's eyes before firmly but gently removing the heir's hand from his collar. "I know what pain is, Uchiha. I have grown up without knowing either of my parents. Know who they are, yes, but getting to know them, no. You at least had your family for a while before they got taken from you. As for being alone? For most of my life no one in this village would ever give a damn about me. Most of the villagers had hated me and some even tried to kill me once. So believe me, I know what pain feels like, but I did not submit to it and you have no right to throw a pity party about it. You have always been adored and given attention. And yet you claim to be alone? Don't make me laugh." Sakura and Sasuke were stunned, but Naruto sat down again calmly. Sakura because of the way her new teammate was reportedly treated in the past, and Sasuke because of the blonde's statement that he had never met his parents. With a sigh, Kakashi made the decision to steer his team away from these gloomy ideas and toward more lucid skies. "Well now that we have that out of our systems, it's time to talk about the test you two must take. And Naruto, you will be taking it as well. I know you passed before, but this is a new team so you have to take it again." Since he assumed he would have to repeat the process when he picked up the 2 from the academy, Naruto nodded in agreement. Sakura's expression was bewildered as she turned to face their teacher. "Test sensei?" Kakashi gave a nod, but Naruto responded, "He's talking about the test to see if you will be genin or not." Sakura gasped. But we already took one at the academy. I thought that was the test." Shaking his head, Naruto told the 2 that the academy test was only meant to determine whether they were truly prepared for genin and whether they should be sent back to the academy for another year to catch up on what they had missed the first time. After telling them to report to the training grounds at 7 a.m., Kakashi dismissed them. Sakura unsuccessfully attempted to get a date out of the last Uchiha, so Sasuke and Sakura left right away. Kakashi turned to Naruto as the 2 veterans simply sighed as they walked away. He asked his younger friend, "How are you holding up, Naruto?" Naruto simply sighed and said, "Mato and Hiza, those 2 are not sensei. They seem to be more trouble than they are worth. The Uchiha has superiority issues while Haruno seems to be way too interested in him to actually concern herself with training. To be honest, I don't even know if I could work with them tomorrow for the test. Although knowing the council, they will probably give us hell if we don't at least pass the Uchiha." At that, Kakashi sighed. "I'm afraid you're right, Naruto. Especially about the council, I'm afraid. Just try and do your best and we'll try to get them in the best shape we can afterwards. Make sure you get a good night's sleep tonight. Something tells me we're going to need it." After Naruto gave a nod, the 2 parted ways to get ready for the following day. At the moment, Naruto was dozing off in his bed. That's what anyone observing him would see, anyway. In actuality, though, he was conversing with his father during their training session. The mindscape of Naruto, like Naruto and Kakashi that day, Naruto and the Kyuubi were engaged in a primarily ninjutsu sparring match. In addition to employing a few taijutsu techniques if they ever got close enough, the two were primarily using fire and wind style justice. The two fighting now moved their hands so quickly that even the longest chains of sequences only took a second or two, whereas Naruto and Kakashi's hands were a blur. This was the main difference. The two continued to discuss the test Kakashi was required to administer and all of the issues that came with it. Naruto launched a huge fireball at his adopted father, who deftly jumped over it and sent a wind blast at his son, making sure none of it touched the fireball passing beneath him. You know, that council really pisses me off. I just know that they are putting that stuck-up prick on our team just to spite me. And they expect me to work well with the brat and help him pass as well. That's like asking me to jump straight to the moon. Naruto turned it into a tornado and sent it straight back at the big guy when the wind got close enough. The tornado came straight at him as he was saying, "I know how you feel, son, but we are just going to have to find a way to get him and that pathetic excuse for a kunoichi to pass. The good news is that at least that girl might have a chance at being reached and brought to a more suitable level. Though I stress might." He had spin-kicked the tornado when he emerged, sending it to the side where it began to fluctuate before exploding completely and sending wind everywhere. At that, Naruto shook his head and remarked, "I can't wait for you to show me how you do that, father." The fox simply smiled and said, "In time, my son." Then, to his slight surprise, he threw a fireball at the blonde, who created another tornado around him, which, when struck by the fireball, became a fiery vortex. As he saw his son keep the funnel in place without getting hit, the fox grinned proudly and began to increase its power. The blonde then made a gesture with his arm, and the fox turned human as the funnel bowed and rushed. The fox simply stood there, allowing the fire to seep into his body. "Hey, no fair," Naruto jokingly exclaimed. "You're just jealous," his father said, laughing. Before they made the decision to end the evening, Naruto grinned and said, "You got that right." Naruto breathed deeply. "We still have no idea what to do about the test tomorrow. I mean, Kakashi told us it would be the same test as before, but how the hell am I going to get the Uchiha to listen to me? I can't even do the same thing I did last time since I'm sure Kakashi won't have that book with him, so I can't blackmail the guy to make it easier on all four of us. Perhaps you should knock the kid out and fight with a shadow clone transformed to look like him," the Kyuubi said after nodding. After giving it some thought, Naruto sighed and shook his head. "No good, that would just make it even harder to work with the guy when we do pass. And I doubt his fangirl would appreciate it either." Knowing that his son was correct, the fox sighed and simply said, "We'll have to figure something out in the morning." He then bid his son good night. His son gave the gesture back, then exited the mindscape and fell asleep. Next day. Grounds for training 7 the following morning, Naruto got up at 6 and prepared himself. After 30 minutes, he was leaving the building and making his way across the rooftops to the training ground at a respectable clip. He knew it would be wise to arrive a bit early even though he was aware that Kakashi might be at least a little late. If nothing else, he could lay some traps. He made 10 shadow clones and arrived 10 minutes early. The group started opening the shuriken and kunai launchers that Naruto had constructed on his own with the assistance of his old classmate 1010, nodding to the original. Since they were unsure of the two rookies' level of skill, if any, around traps, they made sure their launchers were chakra triggered rather than tripwire triggered. After about 5 minutes, everything was ready, and the clones scattered, leaving the original with memories of the trap locations. Sakura and Sasuke entered the training grounds at the same moment, with Sakura asking Sasuke for a date once more and receiving the typical response from the emo kid. The two turned to face Naruto after spotting him on the training grounds. When Naruto, Mado, and Hiza played war games with Kakashi, he was currently using a copy of a map of the area he had created following the first bell test as a guide. Even though he wasn't holding his breath, he was currently marking the locations where all of the clones had set up traps in the hopes of trying to box Kakashi in close to one of them with assistance from the other two. Sakura suddenly recalled something as the two walked toward him. Naruto?" Sakura interpreted the blonde's glance up from his task as an invitation to carry on. "I just remembered something. Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke-kun." Naruto briefly gets irritated at the word kun. "And I had talked about ourselves yesterday, but we never did hear about you. Yes, I will admit that I forgot him, but upon further reflection, this actually serves the plot well." After a moment of staring at her, Naruto realized that was the reality. He replied, "Very well, as you know, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like reading and playing the occasional prank, though I don't do it as often nowadays." Both raised their eyebrows at that. I swear, it's a recurring theme with these guys. I also like hanging out with my friends and the occasional meal of ramen. I dislike bullies and those who think they are better than others just because of who their parents were. A pointed look at Sasuke. I also dislike those who become ninja just to impress someone. This time a pointed look at Sakura. Sakura was starting to get edgy while Sasuke was starting to get mad. And I really hate traitors and oathbreakers, as well as those who make assumptions without getting all the facts. As for hobbies, I like to learn how to play different instruments, another eyebrow raised by the two. I am a semi-amateur gardener, and like learning new justice. As for dreams, I want to make my parents proud of who I am and become Hokage. Naruto arched an eyebrow at Sasuke as he snorted. Sasuke questioned, how can someone like you be Hokage? When Sasuke became enraged and attempted to start another fight, Naruto simply shook his head and said, that is what I hate about Uchihas and most Hyugas. You all make assumptions without all the facts. To the astonishment of the other two, however, Naruto simply opened a guitar and began to play Eric Johnson's Cliffs of Dover. Kakashi listened with a smile on his face in a nearby branch. Naturally, he had witnessed what Naruto's clones had done, and he agreed with the decision to switch from trip-wired to chakra-trip launchers. Additionally, he had witnessed Naruto's sketch on a copy of the map he had created of the region, and he was certain that once the test began, he would inform the two hopefuls of the traps. Since he didn't often hear Naruto play, he just sat there listening to the music, but he had a hunch that Naruto knew he was there. In addition, his guitar skills were on par with those of a Native American flute or violin. He shushed to a position directly behind the hopefuls, making them jump, as the song came to an end. Naturally, Naruto was aware that his sensei was present because he had visited the training grounds himself, which startled him. However, he assumed Kakashi was merely curious about how he and the other two would get along while they waited. Although he took care to avoid setting up any traps where his teacher was, he had chosen to play along and kept the fact that he could sense his sensei nearby a secret. After all, they didn't want Kakashi to get any ideas about playing with them. He was therefore not surprised when his sensei showed up between the two, as he had been coerced against his will to assist in getting through the day's events. Before deciding to have some fun and adopting a look of surprise, he secretly liked watching the other two jump while maintaining an even gaze on Kakashi. Sasuke and Sakura gave Naruto strange looks when he said, Kakashi-sensei, you're actually on time. Is it going to snow today? Kakashi, who was well aware of what his favorite student was doing, chose to comply. Why yes, didn't you get the weather forecast? There is going to be a huge blizzard in a couple of hours. Well then, Naruto simply smiled, adding, I guess we should hurry and get started then. When the other two started laughing at the expressions on their faces, they realized they were being pulled over by a fast one and became irate. When the two became serious, Kakashi explained the bell test, to which Sakura quickly pointed out that there were actually 3 bells, not just 2. Very good, Sakura. You obviously had no trouble in math class. The reason why there are only 2 bells is that the one who doesn't get a bell by noon goes back to the academy. Not only that, but you will be tied to one of those poles over there and watch while I eat my lunch. Oh, and Naruto, I didn't bring my book, so don't even think about pulling that stunt again to pass. Sakura was upset by the first sentence, but after reading the second, she and Sasuke became concerned, and when they heard the last sentence, their confusion swiftly changed. They turned to face Naruto, who appeared to be recalling a particularly amusing memory as he grinned. When Sakura's curiosity finally got the better of her, she said, Naruto. What is Kakashi-sensei talking about? To the dismay of the Cyclops in the group, Naruto suddenly started laughing and simply said, well, let's just say last time I showed my appreciation for a book series he likes to read and leave it at that. This only made them more interested, but neither of the veterans would elaborate. The other two turned to face Naruto, who simply nodded as they exchanged the thought, all right then, now that you know what this test entails, it's time to begin. Oh, and one more thing, Naruto, try to limit yourself to low chunin levels. Now then, you may begin. Now, Kakashi exclaimed, and he immediately left the area. Naruto saw right away that he had completely concealed his presence, something that only a Junin level or higher person could accomplish. With a slight frown, Naruto led the 2 hopefuls to the nearest group of launcher traps, which were positioned to cover the 4 major compass points. What are we doing here, Dobi? Why are you wasting my time when I should be getting one of those bells? Sasuke asked Naruto as soon as they were seated. The word, Dobi, caused Naruto to raise an eyebrow, but he ignored it because he believed Sasuke was denying Kakashi's claim that he was only capable of low chunin levels. He merely said, And you are Rookie of the Year, why? While shaking his head. Sasuke became enraged, but before he could speak kept going. Kakashi-sensei is a Junin, and one of the best in this village at that. What makes you think that you, who I might add are not even a proper genin yet, can take him on by himself? I've been with him for almost a full year now, and I know almost exactly what that guy can do. And let me tell you, he could wipe the deck with you in less than 10 seconds. Oh yeah? And you think you have a better chance? Said Sasuke, who was even more enraged. Oh, if only he had witnessed the two spar on the day of graduation. Maybe. Now do you want my help or not? Naruto simply laughed. Sasuke said, not, and walked away. Sakura was unsure whether to follow him or stay with Naruto, who simply shook his head as she considered how foolish it was to allow pride to stand in the way of a mission. When Sakura asked Naruto what he was thinking of, he told her that he had led their teacher into a corridor minefield the first time and that he had hopped to do the same with traps he had set that showed her where they were marked on the map. However, he told her that he wanted to see how the Uchiha fared before they took any action. He then rolled up the map and sent a shadow clone that was hanged to resemble a small fox to follow Sasuke and witness the extent of his humiliation. Kakashi, who had witnessed the entire event from a distance, was aware that his blonde pupil was probably aware that they were being watched and understood that the blonde had subtly requested that he demonstrate to Sasuke that he was not as talented as he believed. He thought to himself, if only he had seen Naruto and me sparring 2 days ago and started off in the direction Sasuke had taken, but in a different direction, he would undoubtedly think differently. However, Naruto isn't the type to brag to others in order to make a point. I'll let you speculate as to what might occur next. Naruto simply sighed and shook his head in a dejected way after the shadow clone had dispelled itself. He simply stood up and told Sakura to follow him when she inquired about what was wrong. After roughly 10 minutes of walking at a comparatively leisurely pace, they came upon a small clearing. They entered and discovered Sasuke buried in the ground up to his neck, looking royally enraged over something. Sakura stared at him in disbelief, but Naruto simply shook his head slowly and approached him. You going to listen to me now or should I just leave you here? He said while kneeling. Sasuke simply gave him a more intense glare. With a simple sigh, Naruto said, come on, Sakura, let's go. We're just going to leave him there? Sakura asked in shock. After letting out another sigh, Naruto said, if he's not going to help then he is not worth digging out. Maybe while he is doing it himself he will realize that the only way we can get the bells is together. He then started searching for his sensei in the forest using his nose, much like he had in the former test. It's true that he could have done this earlier, but he had chosen to try to get the other two to cooperate first. Sasuke was simply too arrogant and unyielding, but Sakura seemed to have no trouble listening to someone who had more life experience than she did. Kakashi had left a shadow clone to observe what transpired when Naruto and Sakura arrived, taking a cue from his student's book. Kakashi simply shook his head when it had vaporized. Although Sakura wasn't as hopeless as the two veterans had believed, they were extremely irritated by the fact that he had thoroughly defeated the Uchiha and still refused assistance. We'll have to completely fail him if this continues. We will require aspirin when the council finds out we failed him, so I hope Naruto sealed a ton of it this morning. He soon realized that Naruto was following him, just like the last time, and made the decision to save them both time by going to one of the traps he had seen Naruto mark on his map. He was interested in how Sakura would respond to working alongside Naruto in the face of criticism. When Naruto smelled Kakashi making his way to one of the traps, he was thankful that his sensei had decided not to put them through the charade because, unlike the last time, this time it was unnecessary in terms of testing Naruto's tracking abilities. He positioned himself in front of Sakura and made sure she understood her instructions. He set off the trap and threw a bunch of kunai at Kakashi once he was certain she did. After Kakashi finished dodging, he attacked him with Sakura by his side and began a taijutsu match, both of them keeping the intensity of their battle low to give Sakura a chance. As he avoided a poorly delivered punch from the girl with the pink hair, Kakashi thought, I'll give her this, she's determined not to lose. But she needs to practice her taijutsu a lot. Just as a fireball passed overhead, Naruto suddenly widened his eyes, leapt back, and turned to face Kakashi. He then used the same tornado he had used during his and his father's fight. He caught the ball of fire and turned it into a vortex. As the vortex continued to spin around him, he looked forward to see Sasuke's shocked face. While the two veterans were simply disappointed, Sakura was also taken aback. In order to completely put out the flames surrounding him, Naruto then stopped the wind in the vortex, used the heat it had produced to create a few clouds with highly condensed moisture, and used his water manipulation skills to make it rain. When he did this, both hopefuls became even more shocked, and Kakashi had a single thought: go away. However, nothing good would happen if that failed to attract Sasuke's attention. Naruto said in a menacing tone while glaring at the Uchiha. Sasuke, while using us as a diversion might be considered teamwork, it is only so when planned and especially not when you shoot a fireball right over our heads. Do something like that again and I'll make certain you end up in the hospital. Sasuke laughed, but the test ended before he could respond because the timer had already sounded. The four of them arrived at the training ground's main clearing 5 minutes later. Standing with their arms folded, Naruto and Kakashi gazed at the final Uchiha, whom they felt no shame in tying to the central post in the clearing. What the hell are we going to do with this guy? Was a thought that both of them had. At the moment, Sakura was standing distantly and peered down slightly. Even though she was angry about Sasuke's treatment, she was still in awe of what Naruto had just accomplished. It's unbelievable that he did that. In addition to using a tornado to put out the fire, he also created a tiny rain cloud to douse the flames. Kakashi's head began to shake. Sasuke, Sasuke, Sasuke. What on earth are we going to do with you? You are the only one who did not realize the true purpose of the test, and not only that, you put your teammates in possible danger while you were at it. Sasuke simply stared at Naruto and him. We'll try this again in 15 minutes, but if you can't work together, I'm afraid Sasuke will have to return to the academy. Kakashi sighed and said to the three, okay. Naruto and Sakura, go ahead and have your lunch, but make sure not to give any to Sasuke. He then took a lunch and shuffled out of the way. He wanted him to try to get Sasuke to understand before the test resumed, and Naruto sensed that his teacher had just gone to the edge of the woods to see how they would interact. He took a lunch and sat down next to the restrained Uchiha, sighing to himself at how hopeless that particular task seemed, but keeping in mind what he had said about the council the night before. Sakura appeared unsure but quickly followed. He opened his lunch, looked at Sasuke, and shook his head for what felt like the 100th time. Now do you see why I asked you to work together with this Sasuke? Why should I listen to you, Dobi? Said Imo, simply glancing at the blonde who was speaking. Sasuke snarled, but before he could respond, Naruto raised an eyebrow and said, who is the Dobi really, Uchiha? 'Cause from where I'm sitting, the only one who was dead last in this test is the one who is currently tied to a post without a lunch. You are going to learn eventually that you are going to have to work with others sometimes. No one can ever truly be a one-man army. Not even me with my shadow clones. Even if I had 1,000 clones out, I'm sure I would miss something someone else would have no trouble spotting. Please Sasuke, just this once, let me help. For a minute, Sasuke continued to glare at him. At last, he turned his head and uttered a single word. Fine. I'm glad you two have finally reached a consensus. Sakura and Sasuke, you two pass, Kakashi said as he interrupted. After releasing Sasuke's restraint, Kakashi turned to address the three official genins. Even though Naruto didn't seem particularly pleased, he nodded. All right, now that Team 7 is official again, Sasuke and Sakura, be here at 8 every morning unless I say so. Naruto, I would like you to do the same thing for Mato and Hiza if you don't mind. Observing Naruto's expression, Sakura questioned, what do you mean, sensei? He means I will be the one doing most of the teaching in the morning before we all meet up for missions, replied Naruto. Naruto clearly knew what he was doing, so Sakura had no issues with this. But the idea of learning from someone who was just a year older than him infuriated Sasuke. However, he didn't say anything because he didn't want to ruin what he had just received. The group then dispersed for the remainder of the day. Office of the Hokage. Before they began, every Junin who had consented to take a genin team waited for Kakashi to arrive in the Hokage's office. Kakashi emerged in front of the Hokage's desk with a pop and a little smoke. He walked over to a wall and leaned against it, raising a hand and saying, "Yo," in greeting. The Hokage gave him a nod before starting. Now that everyone is here, let's begin. How did the new teams do? Teams 1 through 6 all failed, with the hopefuls either giving up on being ninjas altogether, needing a little more time at the academy, or being completely hopeless. Everyone watched Team 7 and wondered how Kakashi's mixed-race team had performed on the opening day. Kakashi sighed and said, Team 7. Passed, barely. The other members of the group were taken aback. All of them were aware of Naruto's skill and found it hard to understand why a team with him on it would nearly fail, particularly when that team also included the top 2 rookies. Kakashi, if I may ask, why did a team which should have been one of the best teams made this year almost fail? Asked the inquisitive Hokage. With a sigh, Kakashi described what transpired between Naruto and the novices. Sir, things did not go very smoothly between Naruto and the rookies. The Uchiha has a superiority complex while the Haruno seems to be more interested in chasing the Uchiha than being a ninja. While Naruto was able to get her to work with him, Uchiha kept butting heads with him numerous times. It took me and Naruto tying him to a post to even consider working together. And even then he barely gave in. That boy is just too prideful for his own good. When the other Junins heard that Naruto was having such a difficult time, they were taken aback. Ordinarily, he could win over anyone. They were aware of this since Naruto was consistently selected as the team leader and the majority of Junins with teams chose to hold a series of minor war games. Sarutobi let out a sigh. By the sound of things, Naruto should be able to help Sakura with her problem, but the Uchiha might be a bit of a problem. We will just have to hope that he can get Sasuke's head on straight. Now then, what about the rest of the teams? Though they appeared to perform far better, the other two teams had also passed. When they were all done, Sarutobi thanked them and walked away. He leaned back in his chair and gazed out at the village, sighing when they were gone. Naruto, I'm sure you will be able to get through this, he said, taking a drag from his pipe. Naruto was upset. He was so furious that it didn't even come close to describing his feelings. He could see Sakura trying his hardest to assist with training. Sasuke was a different story. Naruto knew he had no right to be there for more reasons than just his arrogant demeanor, and it was the pride. Naruto believed that Sasuke would constantly attempt to outdo him. The issue for Naruto was not his ego telling him to beat up a newcomer who posed a threat. No, the fact that that way of thinking led to mission deaths was what really infuriated Naruto about the Uchiha's attitude and made him want to beat the child to the ground at that moment. After explaining this to the Hokage, he hoped to gain his consent to use any means necessary to help the child get his act together. Because it would happen outside on a mission and the poor fool might not survive if he didn't give the so-called genius a much-needed wake-up call in the safety of the village. At the moment, he and his father were talking about ways to wake the child, but they knew that even with the Hokage's approval, anything too serious would make the council angry. Regretfully, they believed that in order to wake the child, they would have to take some rather extreme measures. And although father and son agreed that the majority of the council members should go straight to hell, this did not change the fact that the blonde had to listen to them, which is why he was so angry. Office of the Hokage sitting at his desk, Sarutobi gazed out the window. 5 minutes before their dismissal, the Junins had completed their reports on the Genin test. Being among the last to leave, Kakashi had informed the Hokage that Naruto might stop by later to offer his thoughts on the test as well. Sarutobi was certain that would be the case. Although Naruto was a skilled ninja and preferred to work through issues on his own, he occasionally sought guidance from him or his previous instructors when he needed it. Additionally, Sarutobi was aware that Naruto would undoubtedly require assistance in handling the Uchiha because the council appeared to love the last devoted Sharingan user. Particularly since Naruto repeatedly stated that he disliked people who allowed pride or those with well-known last names to control them. Sarutobi was certain that his favorite blonde ninja would be put to the test during the next few months at the very least. He was considering this when someone knocked on his door. He leaned forward as Naruto sat down, not surprised that the blonde had entered when invited. Blonde sighed and made the decision to be direct with his leader and grandfather figure, gesturing for him to speak. Hokage-sama, I'm afraid I'm going to need your help with something. My two teammates leave a lot of things wanting. Sakura Haruno, although seems more interested in chasing our teammate than becoming a good ninja, has at least shown signs she can be helped. That I can handle on my own. What I really need your help on is dealing with the other new member of Team 7. Naruto took a moment to collect his thoughts. Despite their close relationship, he was aware that this was a delicate situation, so he was careful with what he said next. I can clearly see that Sasuke Uchiha and I will constantly be at odds with each other. He has allowed the village's worship of his clan get to his head and has proven multiple times during the test that he will not or cannot work as a team player. The reason he has done this is that, as he himself has stated, he strongly believes that he is superior to everyone else and does not need help. I have tried multiple times reaching out to him, but failed all but once. The second to last time, Sasuke actually put not only me and Kakashi-sensei in danger but his classmate as well. The only reason he even agreed to work with us last time was because we threatened to send him back to the academy, which if the council was not so interested in him, I would have done anyway. The boy needs a wake-up call, sir, and I'm afraid only a rather rude one will have any effect whatsoever. However, like I said, the council has interest in him. Therefore I need your approval for me to do what I feel is necessary to open his eyes. because if it is not done in the safety of the village walls, but outside during a mission, I cannot guarantee that the Uchiha will survive. The Hokage paid close attention to what Naruto was saying and realized that he was fully serious. He was entirely in agreement with him, particularly regarding the council's interest in the Uchiha and its implications. After Naruto had finished, Sarutobi nodded and said, "I have heard your case, Naruto, and I agree to it. Do what you feel is necessary to set Sasuke Uchiha on the right track. I will do my best to keep the council off your back while you take care of this problem. Just make sure not to kill him." That made them both laugh a little. After expressing gratitude to the Hokage, Naruto departed the room. As he shut the door, he had the same thought, but neither of them knew it. This will be a fascinating experience. The following day, Team 7 training grounds. The two rooks arrived at the training grounds 5 minutes early, just as they had the day before. They were amazed by what they discovered. Naruto was practicing breathing techniques while seated in a contemplative posture. But they weren't surprised by this. They could plainly see the wind creating a tiny funnel that was neither larger nor smaller than Naruto himself because he was now 3 feet off the ground. "I've never seen such perfect chakra control before," Sakura reflected. "How did someone who was just a year older than us become so good?" Sasuke simply assumed he was doing it to brag. Naruto opened his eyes upon detecting their presence and let the tiny tornado fall beneath him. His knees were bent slightly as he landed lightly on his feet. He went on to say, "I'm glad to see that you both have a good sense of time. Today is going to be mostly about figuring out where you stand. After that, we will deal accordingly. We will skip Taijutsu since I have seen you both in action. So let's start first with Ninjutsu. After that, we will cover Genjutsu. Then come weapon usage and finally chakra control. Once all that is done, I will figure out what our main focus will be on and how we can improve those areas that need it. Any questions?" Sakura made the decision to inquire. Naruto. I know it's not related, but how did you get such good chakra control?" With a simple laugh, Naruto began massaging the back of his neck. Sakura and Sasuke exchanged a perplexed glance as he responded, "Shadow clones." Naruto described how his chakra was too abundant to perform the standard clone just you correctly without going overboard. He then described how Mizuki and Iruka chose to teach him shadow clones in place of just you while they were reviewing it at the academy. Additionally, after being dispelled, the clones would return memories, including advancements in chakra control, to the original. Additionally, he described how he had applied this knowledge to reach his current position. But Sakura was still perplexed. "But Naruto, from what you said, you have gained years of knowledge. How could you do that with only 1 or 2 clones at a time?" Naruto made his favorite hand gesture and smiled like a fox. He called, "Mass Shadow Clone Jutsu." Immediately after, they were engulfed in a fog. They were surrounded by a sea of blonde when it cleared. Naruto dispelled the clones after observing the two rooks' shocked expressions and explained that he had enough chakra to keep that number for at least a day. The fact that someone Naruto's age could have so much chakra to use astounded Sakura and Sasuke. Naruto then made the decision to get things going. Ninjutsu was their first. The fact that Sasuke only knew fire styles did not surprise Naruto. After all, that was the Uchiha's reputation. Unfortunately, Sakura only had the 3 Academy Justice, but Naruto was aware that even those were useful. Following the demonstration, Naruto handed a chakra card to each of them and described its operation. He gave Sakura one to discover her nature and one to Sasuke to see if he had more than fire for a nature. As it turns out, Sasuke had a slight affinity for both fire and lighting, which made Naruto think he might be like Kakashi. It turned out that Sakura had earth as a primary in addition to water. They had all 5 elements between the 3, which made Naruto very happy because he had mostly wind. At one time or another, he knew that little tidbit would be useful. After introducing them to Genjutsu, he escorted them to Kurenai's training area, where she consented to take a test for him. As it happened, Sakura was far more adept than Sasuke at spotting and breaking Genjutsu. He put them to the test on weapons when they returned to their own training grounds. He required them to complete both stationary and mobile tests. The two would have to hit him with their own shuriken or kunai after he threw one across the field. Sakura was not far behind Sasuke, but Sasuke performed better at this. They then moved on to the last and most favored test for Naruto. Chakra control. They were instructed to balance as many kunai on their fingers as they could after he demonstrated the balancing technique. Sakura once more demonstrated her skill by balancing kunai on each finger, whereas Sasuke was only able to do so for a maximum of 10 seconds. He was obviously not pleased with that fact. Naruto had the two practice their stamina after the test was completed because they both needed improvement in that area. Sasuke objected to being made to perform push-ups and squats, particularly after Naruto claimed that he was the weakest person in his class. However, he did so after Naruto arm wrestled him with weights set to 25% to demonstrate his point. In case you missed it, that's 250 pounds for each limb. Despite carrying so much weight, Naruto easily defeated Sasuke. Naruto joined them, but he moved much more quickly than the two of them and completed at least twice as many tasks as they did. When Kakashi arrived at the training grounds at noon, he saw this scene. On the way to the Hokage tower in order to begin on some D ranks, Team 7 was making their way to the tower. Before continuing, they had made a brief stop at Ichiraku's for a quick meal. When they arrived at the floor where missions were assigned, it was about 1 o'clock. As was customary when the Hokage was present, Iruka and Mizuki were now working the desks. The three began to smile when they saw Naruto enter. Naruto was ready to use a lot of clones today because he understood the meaning behind that look. Sasuke and Sakura were shocked to hear Naruto speaking to the Hokage in such a manner. Naruto stepped up to stand next to Kakashi and said, "Judging by your looks, old man, you guys must have quite a few D ranks today." That elderly gentleman laughed and said, "You could say that, Naruto. We are really just glad that you're back with us. The village just doesn't look the same without you doing all those D ranks you used to. But now that you're back, we can get a lot of stuff out of the way now. Also, a client specifically asked for you. You remember Mrs. Aryan, right?" Naruto gave a nod. Due to the Kyuubi attack, Mrs. Aryan was left a widow. Mrs. Aryan viewed him as a hero, in contrast to those who had initially viewed him as the Kyuubi. She enjoyed taking care of her own garden, which was rather large, in her backyard. But occasionally, when her arthritis flared up, she would call in a genin team to help. She and Naruto got along pretty well, and Naruto gained a lot of knowledge about gardening that he didn't have before meeting her. Iruka threw the mission scroll to the blonde, and Sarutobi nodded in response to his question. "I take it her arthritis is acting up again?" He inquired, "Anything else?" After giving Naruto 2 more mission scrolls, Iruka nodded. Both maintenance tasks. With a nod, he and Kakashi walked out of the room and guided the rooks to their first destination. While traveling, Naruto gave them an explanation of Mrs. Aryan's identity and the purpose of their gardening assistance. Though he kept his thoughts to himself, Sasuke was disappointed that they would only be performing these alleged D-rank missions for at least a week or two. Upon arriving at Mrs. Aryan's, they discovered her seated in a chair on her porch. "Thanks for coming, Naruto. I heard about what happened to your team. Will Mato and Hiza be all right?" she said after getting up and giving him a hug as Naruto entered her gate. "Yeah, they're all right, but they will be out of commission for a while," Naruto said, nodding. After giving this a nod, the elderly woman escorted the group into the backyard. Sakura was astounded by the size of the garden. "Do you really usually maintain this garden by yourself?" she asked, turning to face the client. Mrs. Aryan laughed and replied, "Yes, although when my arthritis acts up I'm afraid I have to hire a team to help. Ever since last year, I've been having Naruto come to do it. His ability to create shadow clones really helps when it comes time to weeding and transferring plants." At this, Naruto simply rubbed the back of his neck and made roughly 20 shadow clones. After that, he waited while Mrs. Aryan gave the new guys instructions and got them to begin weeding. While 10 others began moving some plants into pots with fresher soil, Naruto left some clones with them to work on that. The other 2 clones, meanwhile, accompanied Naruto and Mrs. Aryan to her rose garden, where they started chopping off the dead parts. When they got to the roses, Naruto reached into his pouch, took out a scroll, and opened a pair of gloves, clippers, and a few trash bags. Each of his clones followed suit, opening the items they would require. Naruto and Mrs. Aryan got to work searching through the rose bed as soon as they were prepared. Since Naruto knew what he was doing, Mrs. Aryan hung back and let him handle the majority of the work. Occasionally, she would intervene to remove a few weeds that had somehow gotten there or instruct Naruto to trim a particular section of the plant. The bed of 20 roses, which were arranged in 2 rows of 10 with a split in the middle, took him and the clones just 5 minutes to go through. After that, the original tied up the bags containing the dead roses and took them to the front yard gate so the garbage collectors could pick them up, while the clones went to the ones moving plants. When Naruto returned to the house, he noticed that the plants had finished being moved and that there were hardly any weeds left in the rest of the yard. Mrs. Aryan approached him, grinned, and remarked, "Ah, the wonders of shadow clones." With a laugh, Naruto assisted the others in carrying their bags to the gates. The team was only there for roughly 10 minutes in total. Naruto had a shadow clone head to the Hokage with the now completed mission scroll as the team departed for their next task after bidding Mrs. Arian farewell. The following assignment was also fairly easy. They only needed to paint a fence. This fence was unique because it was at least 200 feet long. Naruto was certain that this one had been saved specifically for him to complete by the team at the mission's desk. He wasn't particularly bothered by it. As with gardening, he had actually become fairly proficient at painting, so it wasn't exactly his first time. He sent a shadow clone to retrieve the paint supplies from the shed, where they are typically stored, on the way there. About a minute separated the clone and team when they met at the fence. He then turned to Sakura and Sasuke and explained that the best way to paint the fence was to outline, or cut, as the term actually means, the edges of each picket while he was showing, and then quickly fill in the rest with another brush. Sakura received a frustrated glance. But Naruto, that will take forever. And why did your clone only bring 3 cans of paint? Sakura. Naruto simply smiled and remarked, I thought you were a quick learner. Upon noticing her perplexed expression, he seized a cutter's brush, a standard brush, and one of the 3 paint cans. Holding these items, he yelled, Shadow clone Justu. Approximately 100 clones gathered around them, holding the brushes and paint cans. Naruto kept grinning as he observed Sakura and Sasuke's shocked expressions and remarked, Oh, the wonders of shadow clones. He instructed Sakura and Sasuke to work individually in 5-foot gaps and to begin on this side. He then proceeded to the opposite side, which was actually down a different street that led to this one, with his clones. He was aware that Kakashi was capable of handling any issues. He began placing clones where they would be most useful as he made his way to the end. He allocated a 5-foot section to each clone group and started positioning them at the halfway point. The clone group would leapfrog to the next section that became available after completing theirs. He estimated that he could finish everything and double-check in about 10 minutes because of how many clones he had created. He himself got to the very beginning and began, still smiling. Team 10 passed by Sakura and Sasuke, who had just completed their first and were working on their second segments. When Ino saw that Sakura and Sasuke were the only ones working, he thought, Look at her, so smug being next to Sasuke-kun. She must be enjoying every second of it. Hey, hold on a second. The kid with the blonde hair who picked them up at the academy 2 days ago is nowhere to be found. Hey Sakura, you know that job's perfect for you. By the way, where's your other teammate? I thought you were supposed to do missions as a team. Ino asked, determined to get some answers. Sakura frowned at Ino as she glanced over her shoulder. Gee, thanks Ino, and for your information, Naruto is at the other end and working towards us. Like Shikamaru and Choji, Ino simply raised an eyebrow. Ino made the decision to try to get her to give him a raise. Sakura could only laugh when Ino asked, Gee Sakura, what did you do to force your poor teammate to leave you and Sasuke-kun alone? This only infuriated Sakura. With a vein beginning to form on her forehead, she questioned, what is so funny? Sakura simply gave her former friend one last glance before turning around and completing the fence. She paused to catch her breath before responding. I didn't push Naruto anywhere, Ino. He assigned us to start here and he and his shadow clones started on the other side. Now if you will excuse me, I really need to get this done. Asuma intervened and told them they had to continue heading to the tower just as Ino was about to respond. As the 3 genins turned the corner, they noticed something strange. Sakura and Sasuke were working on a 30-foot section of the fence, which was in the shape of an L. Approximately 270 feet remained for Naruto and his clones to work on. They also had work. Only 20 clones remained, and the originals in the vicinity gathered in clusters beginning at the corner and ending around 20 feet away from it. While one clone would fill in the remaining picket and proceed, another would cut the picket and move on to the next one. At last, a third clone would emerge to ensure that no areas were overlooked. On the first 5-foot segment, the original was cutting away from the corner while 2 of the clones worked alongside him. Going to start your team on missions, Asuma? He asked, looking up from his work when he sensed Asuma's presence. Asuma raised her eyebrows and replied, Yes, although with you doing missions like this one again, I don't see what the others will be doing. Not that the other genin squads are complaining, I bet. While the genin observed the exchange and wondered what was happening, Naruto simply laughed. Then Ino had an idea. Your name's Naruto, right? After cutting the picket he was on and stepping aside to allow the clone next to him to work on it, Naruto turned around and went on to the next one. He nodded, that's right. Was it your idea to pair Sakura and Sasuke-kun like that back there? Ino responded. Team 10's 3 male members were frowning, aware of the direction this was taking. Naruto simply asked the spotting clone to take over, and it did, turning to face her. He inquired, "Is there a problem?" Ino practically yelled, "Yeah, there's a problem. What were you thinking putting those two together?" She became even more agitated when Naruto raised an eyebrow in response. Calmly, Naruto opened one of his paintbrushes, which he always has on hand in case another team uses the others, and began making sure all the needles were straight. "Last time I checked, what I have my teammates do is none of your concern, Yamanaka." That was enough for Ino, but before she could choke this blonde jerk, Naruto switched off his chakra weights and quickly painted the outside of the Yamanaka heir's clothing. Ino simply stood there in awe as Naruto took a moment to admire his handiwork before making some hand gestures and using his abilities to manipulate water to make every single drop of paint disappear from Ino's clothing and return to the paint can, leaving no evidence that anything had truly happened. After seeing this, Choji and Shikamaru both had a single idea: that was awesome. Naruto simply said, glancing at Ino, "Miss Yamanaka, if that will be all, I really must be getting back to work." He turned around and began spotting when she nodded. Asuma made the decision to leave and waved to Naruto, who gave it back. One thing was known when the 3 genin departed: avoid interfering with Naruto. After they left, Naruto completed his task and turned the corner, where he was happy to see that the 2 rooks were nearly finished. After finishing with the assistance of several of his clones, he passed the 2 and approached Kakashi for a conversation. Sakura noticed the smile on his face and inquired as to what was so funny. Naruto merely said that he had a fascinating conversation with Team 10 and stopped there. Village of Hidden Leaf. Naruto sent a clone to the tower, as he had done previously, and another to clean their supplies before returning them to their storage area after Team 7 had completed painting the fence. They were now on their way to a stream that was just outside the village walls and of a moderate size. Remember how they cleaned up the stream as part of their anime D ranks. Since this was the first time she had ever felt this way, Sakura was scanning her surroundings. Sasuke was merely complaining about how unfair it was that everyone had to perform these pitiful missions and follow orders from someone he believed to be beneath him. Even Naruto was pondering how he could lift Sasuke's head from the clouds. In the back, Kakashi was keeping an eye on the team's interactions, or lack thereof. They arrived at the stream they were to clean up about 10 minutes after they left the South Village gates. On the stream's bottom, the group could see some trash. Naruto reflected, "Well, I've seen it in worse shape. Alright guys. This is what we are going to be doing for the rest of the day," he said, turning to face the rooks. So he opened 2 baskets with straps on them and opened a box of disposal bags. Once more, the same one they used in the anime. He then connected 2 ropes to trees on either side of a 50-foot area, giving them another workspace. "You don't honestly expect me to clean up another person's trash, do you?" Sasuke asked, deciding to be a smartass. Despite his growing annoyance, Naruto maintained his composure. Rather, he chose to shoot back. "What's the matter, Sasuke? I would have thought that this would be no problem for the great Uchiha. Don't tell me you're afraid of getting a little wet. Or is it that you can't swim?" "Of course he can swim. Sasuke-kun can do anything," exclaimed Sakura in a fit of rage. "Good. That means he should have no problem with this." Naruto simply snorted and said, "Now if you will excuse me." He crossed his hands, and a sizable horde of shadow clones materialized. He turned to them and said, "All right guys, you know the deal." The clones on the right side nodded, opened their individual garbage bag boxes, and left in pairs. To reach that area and the area beneath the falls, the majority traveled upstream, while a small number traveled downstream. "I want this area spotless when I come back. Oh, and Sasuke, I'll be leaving a clone here so I will know if you work or not," he added, turning to face the 2 rooks. Naruto left before the emo kid could respond, heading upriver to meet up with his clones. Already, the clones near the ropes were in action. While the other clones stood by him, holding the garbage bag for him to place the trash in, one clone would be in the water collecting trash. As Naruto continued to move upstream, the clones would all nod to him, and he would return the favor. He stripped off his shirt and pants, leaving only his boxers, and headed to the end of the chain, joining the final 2 clones. Naruto and his group would clean an area and move upstream, in contrast to the other clones who would dispel after finishing their area and taking their bags to the disposal area. The majority of the clones completed their work about 30 minutes later and began carrying their bags to the designated location for disposal. Soon after Sasuke and Sakura finished, the clone observing them asked a person who was en route to take their bags with it, and the person consented. When the boss and others were done, It instructed the two rooks to wait on the bank. Sasuke complained about having to listen to more than one annoying blonde every day as he was making his way to the bank. The clone simply changed the water around Sasuke's feet, knocking them out from under him. The clone then merely warned him to be careful where he stepped because there might be some slick spots on the bottom. Kakashi, who was perched on a tree branch, looked up from his book but simply sighed and shook his head before returning to it. Sakura attempted to assist him in standing up, but he ignored her and glared at the clone, who raised an eyebrow at the Uchiha, clearly asking, "What?" The original decided they had gone far enough up the river after another 15 minutes, and his group returned to his clothes. He and his group put them on and went back. The clone tasked with keeping an eye on the two dispelled itself upon seeing him, and Naruto regained its memories, including those from 15 minutes prior. "All done here?" he said, shaking his head and laughing softly at what had transpired. Sakura merely nodded to him, while Sasuke merely glared at him. He led the group back to the tower while nodding. After the group returned to the tower with their mission pay, Naruto instructed the rooks to report to the training grounds at 7 the following day and then let them do as they pleased. When his leader and former teachers saw the door close behind them, he sighed to himself. Mizuki noticed that Naruto was a little tense and asked, "You all right, Naruto?" Naruto simply nodded and turned around. "Yeah, it's just that dealing with that Uchiha can be a real pain sometimes." Knowing exactly what the blonde was talking about, the two teachers nodded. Before posing the query that the entire group was contemplating, the elderly man merely observed, "Do you think you can help them, Naruto?" Naruto let out a sigh and said, "I will do my best, old man, but it is really up to them. Sakura I can see wanting some help, but the Uchiha will most likely be too stubborn to take what I give him at face value." After nodding in agreement, the Hokage asked Naruto to try his hardest. Naruto nodded and was dismissed. The Hokage nodded once more and brushed Kakashi aside as he turned to face him and said, "I hope there weren't too many problems today." Kakashi simply shrugged and replied, "Went about as well as expected, sir." Naruto was waiting for Kakashi when he emerged, and the two went to get their pay before going out for a quick snack while Naruto explained the tests he had the two rooks complete to get a sense of what they could actually do and how he could help. Before going to their training grounds and beginning their own training, they talked about what Naruto could do to assist the two. Training grounds for Team 7. The following day when Sakura and Sasuke arrived, they witnessed an uncommon sight: two virtual armies engaged in a straight-up taijutsu battle. Normally, they wouldn't have found this too odd because they had already witnessed Naruto's ability to produce numerous clones. But the speed at which the clones were moving made it appear less like a real battle and more like a collection of blurs traveling quickly with the occasional puff of smoke. While they played their little taijutsu war game, Naruto was doing sit-ups in front of his clones. Naruto sat up and whistled as he saw the two rooks while he was in the down position. The remaining clones that were engaged in combat halted and dispelled themselves upon hearing the whistle. Me and Kakashi-sensei decided that it would be best if we started you off with a warm-up routine before we start training each day. Starting today, you will be doing a set number of push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, and laps around this clearing. After that, we will work on whatever I decide for the day. Is that understood? Naruto said, turning to the rooks as he stood up after absorbing the memories of the clones. The two rooks nodded, and the three began training. Following their warm-up, Naruto explained, "All right. I've decided to mainly work on your chakra control this week. To begin with, I am going to teach you to climb trees." He then led them to the training ground's tallest trees. Knowing what was about to happen, he hesitated. He wasn't let down either. Climb trees. We already know how to climb trees, Dobi. We could do that since we were 5. A smile spread across Naruto's face as he turned to face the Uchiha. Maybe with your hands, Uchiha. But can you do it with only your feet? Time to really start telling him where he belongs. He then approached a tree and planted a foot on its trunk after noticing the bewildered expressions on the faces of the two. Then, with a smile on his face, he walked 20 feet up the tree and under a branch before turning to face the two and saying, "You got a long way to go, Sasuke. I learned how to do this when they taught us how to make clones in the academy, and my two teammates were right behind me when I showed them. They only took half a day to get it down. I'm betting it takes you at least a week." Sasuke was furious, but Sakura was just shocked and in awe that chakra could actually accomplish that. Strong words from the team member with the worst chakra control. "Oh yeah, Dobi. Well, I'll have that down by the end of the hour." When the Uchiha made the Dobi remark, Naruto scowled at him but ignored it because he knew he could kick the Uchiha's ass at any time. He also explained that you had to direct your chakra to the soles of your feet and that you needed to have the precise amount or you would either blast off the tree or slip off it. It would be ideal, he added, if they began with a run. He pulled a few kunai out of his pouch, threw them onto the ground in front of the two, and instructed them to use them to record their achievements. Sakura stared resolutely at the tree as Sasuke took the kunai, thinking that he would demonstrate to the dobi what he was capable of. They started running up and headed for different trees next to each other. Sasuke ascended roughly 7 paces before the bark abruptly gave way. Before the bark exploded and he was pushed off the tree, he marked his spot as soon as possible. He flipped, fell to the ground, and looked at the tree. For the first time, he thought he did pretty well, and he grinned. Naruto shook his head and watched. He had witnessed Duckhead's performance, but he had also accompanied Sakura to the workout and knew exactly how to bring Sasuke's head back to reality. With a smug expression on his face, Naruto said, "Not bad, Sasuke. But are you sure you are Uchiha? I thought that you guys were supposed to be the best?" Naruto then gestured to Sakura, who was sitting on a branch at the same level as him, grinning and proud of herself. When he saw Sasuke's expression, Naruto, "You know Sasuke, it's kind of sad. At the rate she's going, Sakura here will have this down within an hour, whereas you will probably still be doing this for at least a couple of more days, if not the rest of the week." Sakura scowled when she heard what the blonde said to Sasuke, but she was proud that Naruto believed in her that much. Before attempting the tree once more, said Imo gave Naruto a fierce look. Naruto chuckled to himself, thinking, well, that got him motivated. He was thrilled to see 2 people enter the area they were in. He flipped to his feet after falling to the ground, grinning to himself. He encouraged the 2 to persevere and made a shadow clone to observe their development while he went to speak with the 2 who were waiting nearby. When Sakura and Sasuke saw where he was going, they wondered who he would meet, but they were told to return to work by the clone, so they had no time to consider it. As he approached his former teammates, a pair of brown eyes, one dark blue, met his own light blue. While giving his friends hugs, Naruto questioned, "They finally let you out, huh?" Mado nodded and remarked, "Yeah. And let me tell you, that physical rehab was a huge bore fest." Hiza and Naruto laughed together as Naruto inquired about his thoughts over the previous 2 weeks. "So how long until you 2 can be back in action? It can't be too long if you're already walking again." Hiza responded after the 2 exchanged glances and sighed. "We may be walking, Naruto, but it will still be a while. We only just finished rehab this morning, and that was just for getting our bodies to do everyday things and walking. It'll be another month at least before we can do anything strenuous, and even longer to get our chakra abilities back to regular genin levels. I'm afraid we won't be back to where we were before for the whole year like the doctors thought." When Naruto heard this, he scowled. He sincerely hoped that his friends would recover more quickly. The news that we could resume training in a few months at the latest was encouraging, but the idea of working so hard to return to their location was killing him on the inside. What those 2 were going through, he could only imagine. "Cheer up, Naruto. It could have been a lot worse. Besides, now we've got plenty of time to do what we want to. I've made amazing progress with sealing now that I don't have to do any missions or anything like that." Naruto frowned, realizing that his friend was just fine at sealing and that it wasn't really a good thing that he felt he needed to be injured like he had to get better at it. Mado saw the look and knew what his friend was thinking. Hiza chose to shift the conversation after noticing her friend's expression and deciding that her other friend's method of stress relief wasn't the most effective. "So how are the new guys? Are they any good?" Naruto just laughed at that and said, "Are you kidding me? How they ever made it out of the academy is beyond me. Sasuke Uchiha has a superiority complex and believes that whatever I can do, he can do better. Never mind the fact that he's got a problem with working with others, he can't get it through his thick skull that there are others his age that are better than him. He's worse than Neji. At least he had a reason to be so cocky, but this guy must have used his name to get through and get the title Rookie of the Year. That's the only way he could have possibly passed this year. Sakura Haruno is just as bad. She's a fangirl of the Uchiha." At this, the 2 winced knowing how Naruto hated fangirls. The only thing she's got going for her are book smarts and extremely good chakra control. Other than that she's got nothing. The only thing that doesn't make her worse than the Uchiha in my book is that she seems to be willing to listen to what I tell them. The Uchiha couldn't give a rat's rear end about what I say." Hiza and Mado exchanged another glance before turning back to Naruto. Mado remarked, "Well, at least you have Kakashi-sensei as a teacher. Imagine if you had to get a new one that idolized the Uchiha." Naruto instantly went pale when he thought about it and visualized it. With a composed expression, he said, "Don't even joke about that. The two then discussed how the new guys got along with the D ranks. When Hiza and Mato heard what Naruto had done to Ino after she confronted him about putting Sakura and her Sasuke-kun together while painting the fence, they both started laughing. They also laughed when they heard what the clone had done to Sasuke at the conclusion of the cleanup mission. They then discussed the rehabilitation and their activities between sessions. They eventually stopped conversing and went off to pursue their own interests. He was pleasantly surprised to discover that Sakura had indeed reached the top during the conversation he and his friends were having as he returned to his charges. At the moment, she was lying on a tree branch near the top, breathing heavily. He looked down and saw that although Sasuke had made some progress, it was nothing compared to what Sakura had accomplished. The Uchiha was glaring at the tree as though he would like nothing more than to blast it with a fireball just you, and he was most likely a quarter of the way up the tree. He walked to the Uchiha after shaking his head and dispelling the clone he was using to watch the two. Despite knowing from the clone's memories that the child would say no, he asked, "Need help?" He thought the child simply might react differently if he had asked first. Regretfully, Sasuke continued to refuse, and Naruto simply shrugged, figuring it wouldn't bother him if it took the child a little time to overcome his pride. After all, he and Kakashi had intended to work on this for the majority of the week. When he saw Sakura smiling proudly down at him, he smiled back at her and leapt up the tree, using the branches as stepping stones. He landed beside her, gave her a canteen he had brought, and urged her to get a drink, which Sakura complied with. He remarked, "Good job, Sakura." Sakura nodded his gratitude, and he went on. Sakura nodded, returned Naruto's canteen, and lay down again. "After you're done resting, I want you to try and walk up the tree next. Do it until you can get up and down twice without resting. This will not only help improve your control, but it will also help you expand your chakra reserves. If you finish today, I'll show you the next step." She started up again, attempting to climb the tree, approximately 5 minutes after Naruto descended again. When Naruto decided to end the exercise, it was about 11 o'clock. Sasuke was now just over halfway up the tree, and Sakura had managed to climb and descend at once before needing to take a break. Sakura descended again and inquired as to why they were coming to a halt so soon. Naruto assured her that they would pick up where they left off the following morning and that there was no use in exerting themselves too much. He then informed them that before they began working on the 3D ranks for the day, he would take them to lunch. Sakura gave this a nod, and upon arriving at the first clearing at the training grounds entrance, she chose to inquire about her current thoughts. "Naruto, who were those two you were talking to? You seem to know them real well." Naruto gave a nod and stated, "My former teammates. They just got out of normal rehab today and are going to start ninja rehab tomorrow." Sakura said, "Oh, I see." She then fell silent, reflecting that, given what she had previously witnessed, it ought to have been fairly obvious to her. "If they were your teammates, then it's no wonder they got hurt so badly," snorted Sasuke. In an instant, Naruto halted and faced the Uchiha. Sakura took a step back when he said, "Care to repeat that, Rook?" in a dangerous tone. When Kyuubi felt his son's rage beginning to rise, he raised his head from his slumber in the seal. As he waited to see what his son would do, he thought, that Uchiha just crossed the line. With a slight smile on his face, Sasuke simply gazed at Naruto and remarked, "You heard me. I said that it was no wonder they got hurt so badly." Naruto said in a level voice as he stepped directly into Sasuke's face. "Talk about my friends that way one more time like that, Teme, and I will personally help you achieve all 3 levels of your Sharingan. Mato and Hiza were easily 10 times better than you were. I seriously doubt you could have survived what they did on that mission." He turned around and began to leave. The claim that those two were superior to him and went against what most people would consider common sense infuriated Sasuke. They couldn't be that strong if they ended up in the hospital. "Are you sure that Kakashi-sensei didn't just save all 3 of your pathetic rear ends on this mission where you got so-called bad intel?" As the father and son exchanged a single thought, Sakura's eyes widened. "That's it. He's so dead." Sasuke turned around and saw Naruto's eyes briefly change from blue to red before he exclaimed, "All right, that does it," and began to attack Sasuke. The killer's intent was so great that Sasuke's Sharingan activated to level 1 right away. It didn't help, though, because Naruto used his strength and speed to transform Sasuke into a meat punching bag. After 10 seconds, Sasuke's Sharingan reached level 2 as he frantically attempted to dodge Naruto's blows, and Naruto charged at him even more quickly after witnessing it. The Sharingan advanced to the 3rd and last level 10 seconds later. Not many Uchihas end up with the Mangekyo, after all. This didn't help at all, though, because Naruto continued to accelerate and continued to beat on the Uchiha air for another minute before stopping. By the time he was finished, Sasuke had one broken leg and two broken arms. In addition, he had a broken nose, a black eye, and numerous bruises. As Naruto calmed his breathing, not from effort, but from rage, he stood over the shattered Uchiha, staring down at him. "Sakura, please take Uchiha to the hospital to be treated. After that, you are dismissed. We will not be doing missions for the day. Please be back here tomorrow morning at 7, he said, turning to Sakura, who had watched the entire event with wide eyes. Sakura nodded, and he turned to face him as she bent to assist Sasuke. "Well, Uchiha, I hope you learned your lesson." Naruto ignored the glare, turning to walk away, thinking that it had felt good to give the Uchiha what he deserved, regardless of what the council thought. Only his father could concur. Having observed the entire scene from a nearby tree, Kakashi could only be relieved that Naruto had not killed the poor idiot of a genius and had stayed with Taijutsu. The Hokage had been using his crystal ball to watch and scowled, knowing that the council would go to hell for this, but he also knew that the Uchiha had caused it himself. Naruto was summoned to appear before the council shortly after lunch. He prepared himself to face a council composed primarily of utter idiots, particularly the civilians, as he stood outside. "You wished to speak to me?" he asked after taking a deep breath, opening the doors, and entering the chamber, pausing in front of the council's seat. With the exception of a few clan heads, particularly Heishi Hyuga, who was relieved to see the supposedly powerful Uchiha degraded, practically the whole council was staring at the blonde. The council had heard the events, and some of the clan leaders thought it was amusing as well as appropriate that the Uchiha be put in his proper place. "Don't take that tone with us, demon. Do you have any idea how much trouble you are in? How dare you send your teammate to the hospital? We should have you stripped of your shinobi status for this," said one council member, glaring even more at the blonde at the tone of his voice. Other members nodded, while the Hyugas and the old Inoshika Cho group rolled their eyes at this statement. "Really? I would have thought the council would have been glad that I helped their precious Uchiha unlock his Sharingan," said Naruto, raising an eyebrow at this. At this point, the council members who were staring at them began to express their hatred for the way he treated him. He simply gazed at each of them for a moment. He chose to show that they didn't frighten him by shrugging. He told the council that their ki was like a kitten next to a tiger in comparison to him, but it was not ki or bloodlust that made him pulse at them. For that brief moment, the majority of the council gasped at the power they sensed emanating from him, while the others raised an eyebrow or even smiled. Speaking up, a moderate council member chose to stop a fight while she could. "Uzumaki, while I agree that according to testimony by your teacher that the Uchiha stepped out of line, it would have been better if you handled the situation a little more delicately. Although I will admit that it is good to know that the last Uchiha has now unlocked his Sharingan, the method used to do so is generally frowned upon. That being said, please try to withhold any such actions in the future whenever possible." Kyuubi asked his son, who nodded in his head, that one was a smooth talker. Did you notice how she acknowledged both sides without saying either side was completely right? When Naruto nodded and said he understood, the council members became a little more relaxed. He then inquired as to whether the council needed anything else from him. The council dismissed Naruto because they knew they could only issue a warning to him and that he had the Hokage's approval to do whatever he thought was necessary to deal with the Uchiha. Well, that went well, Naruto thought as he left, and his father merely snorted before nodding in agreement and returning to his sleep. Sasuke was able to arrive at the training grounds with Sakura in the morning after the hospital's medical staff successfully healed him. Following the warm-up, they resumed their work on the chakra control exercise from the day before. Despite his icy demeanor toward Naruto, Sasuke followed instructions and steered clear of confrontations. As he worked on his own exercises, Naruto simply shook his head and offered guidance when required. By the end of the morning, Sasuke was nearly at the top of the tree and Sakura could walk up and down it twice without needing to rest. They obtained their 3D ranks for the day and successfully finished them. Kakashi and Naruto dismissed the rooks after receiving their pay and headed to their training grounds for individual instruction. Naruto made the decision to begin working on ninjutsu and taijutsu on the fourth day of the new Team 7's training. Taijutsu was the first activity of the day, and Naruto went over the various advantages and disadvantages of the vast array of styles he was familiar with. He made a couple of shadow clones and had Sasuke and Sakura battle them while the clones used the various styles he had described after he had explained what to look for in ways to get past a style. Much to the emo kid's chagrin, Naruto made Sasuke refrain from using his Sharingan for this exercise in order to keep things fair and prevent him from becoming overly dependent on it. After observing the two for 15 minutes and determining what they were doing correctly and incorrectly, Naruto halted the spars and defeated one of the clones while giving the other instructions to assist Sasuke in filling in the gaps in his taijutsu skills because, in his opinion, his interceptor fist style depended too heavily on the Sharingan. Sakura and the original went to another clearing, where they began working together. Like a drill sergeant teaching her everything from grappling to various attack types used when dropping in on an opponent, he began teaching her fighting techniques. While doing this, he suggested that she get a set of weights to improve both her strength and speed. He also offered to accompany her to get some after the day's missions were over, and she accepted his offer. Naruto began teaching ninjutsu when the two groups reassembled at the main clearing an hour before lunch. He began by teaching a few fundamental survival skills, like how to refill cantinas using a water condensation trick in the absence of a ready water supply and how to conceal camp signs. He described each jutsu's duties and the significance of understanding them. Sasuke simply sneered and said they were beneath him, but Sakura embraced it like a sponge. At the sound of this, Naruto's right eye twitched, and then his eyes glowed and he began to smile malevolently. When Sakura saw the expression, she took a few quick steps back. Over the past few days, she had been hearing rumors about her veteran teammate, which she picked up whenever she heard his name now that she had a face to go with it. Having heard the rumors too, but not giving them much thought, Sasuke simply stared at Naruto and silently challenged him to try something. Before his hands flew in a quick series of hand signals, Naruto's smile became especially snarly. The air condensed around Sasuke as soon as he was done, and a sudden drop of what appeared to be 5 gallons of water fell on his head, soaking him from head to toe. Naruto heard his father laughing uncontrollably inside his head, probably causing internal damage by rupturing his spleen from the intensity of the laughter. After a moment of staring, Sakura became enraged and demanded to know why Naruto had done that. "That just you should be learned," Naruto said, simply raising an eyebrow. If he could use that simple just you to make that much water, then it would be easy to use water justice anywhere, even to some extent in a desert. Sakura understood his point and fell silent once more, while Sasuke simply sulked at Naruto and grinned at him like a Cheshire cat. Then, assuming that the child probably didn't know as many of those as he did fire-style justice, he showed Sasuke a few lightning-style justice and gave Sakura a few more simple water justice. Around lunchtime, Kakashi, Guy, and Lee arrived to watch this scene. The two rooks made the mistake of asking the matching sensei, student pair who they were as soon as they saw them. "Yash, Naruto, are you ready to have our youthful weekly spar?" Lee asked Naruto after a somewhat awkward introduction. Sakura and Sasuke simply gazed at the child, but Naruto smiled like the fox he was. "You sure you are for this, Lee? I increased my weights again by another 100 pounds total. You might not be able to keep up." "That is a most youthful thing for you to do, Naruto. But I have also increased my weights this week," Lee simply smiled. Naruto smiled, anticipating a spectacular performance from the two rooks. Sakura and Sasuke were watching this now, and they were both thinking about different things. Those two guys are truly strange. Sakura shuddered a little at the sight of all that green spandex and thought, it's unbelievable that Naruto and Kakashi-sensei would even consider speaking to them. Sasuke thought otherwise. Perhaps now I can make use of my Sharingan and truly learn something from these classes. Both beasts agreed when Naruto and Kakashi met with Guy and Lee the previous evening to explain that they didn't want Sasuke to take the easy route because they knew he would try to copy what he could. Lee was therefore not surprised when Naruto spoke 3 words while staring him in the eye: "Take them off." With a nod, Lee took out the weights from his leg warmers. He dropped them, smiling, and they made tiny craters in the ground, which caused the eyes of the two rooks to swell. With a smile on his face, Naruto released his chakra weights, which made him feel as light as air. After nodding at one another, the two started fighting right away, with their teachers trailing closely behind. To Sasuke's surprise and annoyance, the 4-person group was moving too quickly to be anything more than blurs, even for the Sharingan. As the 4 gave it their all in a rare all-out taijutsu 2-on-2 battle royal, small craters and blasts of air began to appear all around the two rookies. After a good 2.5 hours of fighting, the 4 of them stopped, each of them gasping for air. Everyone was surrounded by craters, some of which were still smoking. Guy looked at Kakashi and replied, "Well, Kakashi, my eternal rival, that was a most youthful display of skill from you and your student. I look forward to our next match." "That was a good one. Thank you and Lee for agreeing to this type of match this time," Kakashi said, nodding. "Of course. Anything to show these youthful new students of yours what they can achieve with hard work, Guy said, striking his nice guy pose. Saying, youthful, made the students perspire, but they remained silent. A few feet away, Naruto and Lee were engaged in a private discussion. Naruto wiped his forehead with his forearm and remarked, "That was a good combo you did at the end, Lee." Lee simply raised his eyebrows and said, "Thank you, Naruto, you also had some good combos. And by the way, good luck with training your new teammates." "Thanks, Lee," Naruto said, nodding. "I know I'm going to need it." Guy called to Lee at that moment, and the two took off, leaving a trail of smoke in their wake. Sakura and Sasuke's stomachs chose that moment to growl, embarrassing them both. Naruto shook his head and went to where his teammates were. He told Kakashi, "That took way too long. We'll probably only have time to do one team mission today since we haven't even had lunch yet." "You're right, though I got to admit that was a really good workout," Kakashi said, nodding. When Sakura and Sasuke learned that the war they had just seen was only a workout, their perspiration stopped. Knowing that Kakashi was playing with the rookies' minds, Naruto nodded his head and smiled as the group departed for lunch before embarking on a mission. A month later, a forest outside the village of Hidden Leaf. Naruto was staring around a tree with his back to it. Naruto thought, "It's about time we got this mission," and then he shrugged. The Hokage probably wanted to introduce the new members of their team without any veterans first. It makes sense because we will likely be doing this frequently again. Naruto was startled out of his reverie by his sensei's voice on his radio. "Team, this is leader, what is your status, over?" According to Naruto, gold in position. One of his teammates responded in a bored manner, onyx in position. The voice of his other teammate said, pink in position. Once more, Kakashi's voice said, "Very well then team. Engage." Naruto spun around the tree, leapt to a nearby branch, and watched the performance. Sakura and Sasuke had hurled themselves at a shadowy figure on the forest floor, which spun around when it heard them pursuing. Sasuke landed face first on the ground as it hissed and leapt straight up in the air. Sakura actually rolled when she hit the ground, landing on her feet and looking around for the now identified cat. As soon as he saw the cat from hell, Sasuke stood up and began to chase after it, growling. Naruto was laughing uncontrollably as he watched Sasuke and Sakura chase after the cat for roughly 5 minutes before the cat abruptly turned around and started biting and scratching everywhere, starting in the areas where the sun didn't shine. Naruto decided that Sasuke had endured enough suffering after a few minutes and descended to the group. After that, he yelled, "Tora!" and shook a tiny catnip-filled toy. When Naruto began scratching the cat behind his ears, the now identified cat abruptly stopped its attack on Sasuke and jumped into his arms, purring. Sasuke glared at the cat as he rose from the scratched ground. Then he glared at Naruto, who arched an eyebrow and asked, "What?" in a nonverbal way. "Don't look at me like that. Why the hell didn't you step in sooner if you could catch it that simple?" said Sasuke, who was even more irate. Naruto simply laughed and replied, "Because you would never learn that way, Sasuke. You got to learn that there is more than one way to skin a cat. Or in this case, catch one. Now come on." After saying that, Naruto turned around and guided the group back into the village, Sakura attempting to persuade Sasuke to allow her to apply some ointment to him while Tora remained purring in his hands. The final Uchiha gave Kakashi a glare when he joined them from where he had been waiting and laughed quietly about Sasuke's state. Tora leapt into the arms of the fire daimyo's wife and began purring once more as she petted Naruto, who was shaking his head back at the tower. "It's still hard for me to believe that she trained that little guy to attack any poor genin who was given the task of occasionally tracking him down when he runs away." As he watched them go, he thought, definitely a good substitute for training for a situation of being attacked in enemy territory. I made my FIC more plausible, but I firmly believe that the wife intentionally trained rookies by doing that to the cat in the manga and anime. "Well done Team 7, Sarutobi said as he turned to face the group after observing the daimyo's wife leave the room. "The next mission is to clean out the Inuzuka's kennels, watch over a council member, or clean up one of the rivers in the training grounds." Both Naruto and Kakashi mentally counted down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, after noticing the expression on Sasuke's face. "No." Sasuke swore, his fist clenched. While Sarutobi, Mizuki, and Iruka looked up from the tables they were at, Sakura gazed at Sasuke in disbelief. "Something the matter, Sasuke?" Sarutobi asked. Glaring at the Hokage, Sasuke declared, "These tasks are beneath me. I want something more challenging." Naruto shook his head, It was one of those times when he and his father both thought the same thing. Stupid. Naruto sighed and turned to face his teammate. Sasuke, why do you look like you just got out of the blender if these missions are beneath you? He asked. Sasuke gave Naruto a fierce look, but the Hokage spoke to the blonde before he could respond. Naruto. He went on after realizing that he had his grandson's full attention, except for blood and title. You have been on more missions than either of your teammates. You have also mainly been the one training these two. Knowing what you do about what these missions usually entail, do you believe they are ready for a low C rank? Naruto closed his eyes and spoke briefly with his father, asking for his thoughts as they reviewed their respective knowledge. If it is a low-level C rank mission, they should be able to handle it without too much trouble. And if not, Kakashi-sensei and I can pull them out, Naruto said, opening his eyes and nodding slightly. Before Sasuke could respond, the elderly man nodded once more and said, Very well Naruto, I will trust your judgment on this. After observing Naruto nod, he added, Iruka, please pass over the C ranks. Iruka gave a nod. Although he was worried that Sakura and Sasuke would go on a C rank so quickly, he was confident that Naruto and Kakashi could manage any situation that arose. After giving Mizuki the mission folder, Iruka sat down and gave him a look that made it obvious, this is going to be interesting when he gets back. Knowing what his friend had said, Mizuki smiled and nodded. Meanwhile, Naruto had noticed Iruka's expression in Mizuki's subsequent nod, and he too had a small smile. While this was happening, Sarutobi perused the folder and paused at what he believed to be the ideal mission. Turning around he said, Your mission should you choose to accept it, I know, too much like Mission Impossible, but I saw the second one and it was really good, is to escort a bridge builder from the land of waves by the name of Tazuna back home so that he can finish his bridge while guarding him until he completes it. You can expect a few bandit attacks but nothing else. Do you accept? When Naruto and Kakashi noticed how Sasuke was staring at them, they chose to make fun of him. Both nodded, and as Sarutobi requested that the client be brought in, Kakashi approached the desk and examined the mission details. When Naruto heard the door open, he turned to see an elderly man holding a bottle of sake, and his sensitive nose detected a faint hint of intoxication. Naruto looked at the man and saw that, although his body language would appear relaxed to most people, he was actually tense for some reason. This is the team that is supposed to be protecting me. They're just a bunch of kids. How am I supposed to know if they won't abandon me at the first sign of trouble? Especially the blonde brat. Tazuna snorted as he took a quick swig from his bottle and glanced at the team. Oh. Cue thunderclouds rolling in. Lol. A normal person might have been offended by that comment, and perhaps Naruto would have been in a different life, but instead he just grinned and proceeded at a pace that the civilians couldn't match. He delivered a kunai to the client's neck, touching the man's Adam's apple with the ring while he held the blade in a light but firm grip with his thumb on one side and his fingers in a fist on the other. Tazuna simply nodded as Naruto pocketed his kunai and moved to stand beside his teacher. Naruto never lost his smile as he said, One of the first rules about dealing with a ninja. Never underestimate us. While Iruka, Sarutobi, and Kakashi simply rolled their eyes at how Naruto had made his point, Mizuki laughed a little. Looking at the scroll, Kakashi responded, All right team, this looks like the mission will take a few weeks to complete, so I want you to go home and pack for a long-term mission. We will meet at the main gate in 1 hour. Dismissed. The group then dispersed and prepared for their mission. I just know things are going to get pretty interesting, Naruto said as he walked through the door after giving Tazuna a quick glance.
I'll continue this story in next part. Till then, we weeb offline.